The flickering of candlelight painted shadows on the cold stone walls, casting the figure of a man who stood quietly in the corner of the dimly lit church. His face was obscured by the hood of his cloak, but his presence commanded the room. The murmurs of the townsfolk fell silent as the man stepped forward, placing a small pouch of coins into the trembling hands of a widowed mother. She fell to her knees, her tears soaking the hem of his robes, but before she could utter a word of gratitude, he was gone, vanishing into the stillness of the night. This was Nicholas. Not a saint, not yet, but a man whose deeds would ripple across centuries. To the poor of Myra, he was an angel in human form, slipping through the cracks of their despair with gifts that felt like miracles. But if you pressed your ear closer to history, you'd hear whispers of a man much more complex than the serene, saintly visage on church murals. He was the son of wealthy parents, or so the story goes, yet their sudden deaths left him not with grief, but with conviction. He could have been another merchant, another wealthy benefactor among the many who paraded their riches. Instead, he chose obscurity. He chose shadows over light, whispers over applause. But what drove a man of privilege to disguise himself as a ghost of generosity? Some say it was faith, others a guilty inheritance. The truth lingers somewhere in the folds of time, elusive and haunting. There are darker edges to his story, the ones the hymns don't sing. The same hands that handed coins to the poor also wielded anger against heretics. His voice, though soothing to the needy, could thunder with righteous fury in courtrooms and council chambers. Tales of his acts of charity stand tall, yet they cast shadows long and deep. In one tale, Nicholas intervened to save 3 young girls from being sold into slavery by their father. Under the veil of night, he tossed 3 bags of gold through their window, one for each dowry. Some versions of the story paint this as an act of pure generosity, others hint at the looming threat of desperation that drove him. The coins clinked onto the cold stone floor of that house, a sound that echoes through history. But was this a man guided solely by virtue, or one haunted by the weight of his own expectations? As his legend spread, Nicholas began to transform. He became not just a man, but a figure molded by those who needed him to be more. In the East, he was the fierce protector of sailors, a saint who calmed storms and saved those adrift in a merciless sea. In the West, he was the gentle bringer of gifts, a guardian of children. Each culture took his name, his deeds, and painted them in colors of their choosing. But beneath these layers of reverence, how much of Nicholas remained? The whispers grew louder. In some corners of Europe, he became a figure of fear as much as of faith. Not everyone who sought his blessing was met with grace. There were tales of the bishop who struck a man down in a fit of righteous anger, tales of his eyes flashing like lightning in moments of divine rage. Saints are human, after all, and humanity is rarely pure. The many faces of Nicholas began to splinter. By the time the Dutch carried his name, Santa Claus, across oceans, he had become unrecognizable. The Bishop of Myra, the protector of sailors, the giver of gifts, they all blurred into one figure who bore only fragments of the man who once walked the stone streets of Myra. But this transformation was not merely the work of time. It was the work of need. People need heroes, figures larger than life who can shoulder their fears and embody their hopes. Nicholas became a mirror, reflecting what each generation wanted most, a savior, a judge, a giver of second chances. The face of Saint Nicholas you see today is not the face he wore centuries ago. It is a mask of time, layered with centuries of longing, of fear, of faith. The faces he wore, the stories they told, do not end here. They bleed into the next tale, into the echoes of the pagan fires and frost-covered forests where the winds carried other names, other spirits, who would soon join his shadowed procession. The air was thick with the scent of pine and smoke, the kind of cold that bit through the thickest wool cloaks and settled in the marrow of bones. Beneath the ancient trees, figures moved, their faces streaked with soot, their eyes glinting in the firelight. They weren't saints or bishops. They were something older, wilder, and bound to the earth in ways the heavens could never understand. The Yule log burned fiercely, its embers spiraling into the starlit sky, as voices rose in chants, primal, rhythmic, echoing through the snow-clad forest. The solstice had arrived, the longest night of the year, when darkness reigned supreme and the fragile light of humanity clung to life. This was a time for gods, for spirits, and for rituals that bridged the living and the dead. It wasn't yet Christmas. It wasn't yet Santa Claus. But the seeds of both were sown in the frostbitten soil of these pagan traditions. Among the Norse, Yule was a time of transformation. Odin, the All-Father, rode through the stormy winter skies on his eight-legged horse, Sleipnir. His wild hunt tore across the heavens, a frenzied chase that brought both blessings and terror. Children would leave offerings of hay in their boots for Sleipnir, hoping to win Odin's favor and avoid his wrath. The echoes of this practice linger, faint but undeniable, in the stockings we hang by the fire, waiting for gifts to appear. But Odin was not alone. The Yule Goat, a creature steeped in mystery, played a role as both harbinger and protector. With horns twisted like ancient roots and eyes that burned with the wisdom of forgotten ages, the goat demanded offerings to ensure the return of the sun. Some say it was sacrificed, others claim it brought gifts in its stead. In either case, the goat's presence in the Yule festivities ensured that light would conquer darkness once more. Even now, the Yule Goat survives as a festive symbol in parts of Scandinavia, its straw figure a pale shadow of its ancient power. Beneath the northern lights, the hearths of longhouses blazed as families gathered to feast. They drank toasts to their gods and ancestors, pouring ale onto the ground to honor the spirits of the earth. These were not mere celebrations, they were acts of survival, rituals meant to appease forces that could not be controlled. Each feast was a pact with the unseen, a promise to endure the harshness of winter together. Across Europe, similar traditions flourished. In Germanic lands, perched in, the fearsome winter spirits roamed the countryside. Some were beautiful, their faces shining like the snow-capped peaks, others were hideous, with twisted features that froze the blood. They brought gifts or punishments, rewarding those who upheld the sacred customs and tormenting those who strayed. Their duality, kindness and cruelty, would later find echoes in the dichotomy of Saint Nicholas and his dark companions, like Krampus. The fires of Yule burned brightest in the rituals of renewal. Ashes from the Yule log were scattered across the fields to bless the crops, a reminder that life emerges from the remnants of the past. This cycle of death and rebirth was more than symbolic. It was a reflection of the people's struggle against the unyielding forces of nature, their hope for the return of the sun. But these traditions were not immune to change. As Christianity spread across Europe, it absorbed what it could not destroy. The Church saw the power in these rituals, the deep roots they held in the hearts of the people. Yule became Christmas, Odin became Saint Nicholas, and the wild, untamed spirits of winter were cloaked in the robes of salvation. The transition was not seamless, nor was it complete. The old ways lingered in the shadows, refusing to be extinguished. Even now, fragments of those ancient nights remain. The evergreen tree, once a symbol of eternal life in pagan rituals, now stands adorned with ornaments in living rooms across the world. The giving of gifts, the feasting, the lighting of candles, these are echoes of the solstice celebrations that once filled the forests with fire and song. But something more primal persists, an undercurrent that stirs in the cold December air. It's in the crackle of a fire, in the silence of a snow-covered night, in the way the stars seem to hang just a little closer to the earth. It's the whisper of a time when gods and spirits walked among mortals, when winter was a test of faith and resilience. And just as the flames of Yule burned for days without end, the threads of these ancient traditions weave into what came next. From the pagan fires of the north to the hallowed halls of Christian saints, the faces of winter blurred together, forming something both new and timeless. The next face, though, would carry not only the joy of gifts, but also the burden of judgment, straddling the line between protector and punisher. The canals of Amsterdam glittered under a pale moon, their icy surfaces whispering stories as the cold wind swept through the city. Children crowded around their hearths, their wide eyes fixed on the boots they had carefully placed by the door. Straw for the horse, a carrot for good measure, and a sliver of hope nestled among the tokens of faith. Somewhere in the night, they believed, a shadow moved, not ominously, but with purpose. Santa Claus was near. He wasn't the jolly, round figure of modern lore, but something more solemn, more enigmatic. Draped in bishop's robes of crimson and gold, he rode a great white horse, a marigo, through the cobblestone streets. His mitre, gleaming in the faint light, bore the symbol of his ancient ecclesiastical lineage. The crozier in his hand wasn't just a shepherd's staff, it was an emblem of authority, a quiet reminder of both mercy and judgment. This wasn't Santa Claus, not yet. Santa Claus belonged to a different kind of winter tale, one that carried the weight of centuries and the shadows of old gods. The children sang songs to honor him, their voices rising like prayer, and they waited. If they had been good, small treasures would appear in their boots, candied almonds, a shiny coin, perhaps a carved toy. But if they had misbehaved, the story warned, something far less comforting awaited. A lump of coal, a switch for punishment, or worse, the stern gaze of his companion. For Santa Claus did not travel alone. Black-clad figures moved in his wake, their faces smeared with soot. They were Zwart Piet, dark and mysterious, their role both helper and enforcer. They climbed roofs, slid down chimneys, and carried sacks that could bear gifts or the misbehaving child who dared test the limits of Santa Claus's patience. The line between kindness and fear blurred here, as it so often does in tales that have weathered time. There was no sleigh, no jingling bells, but there was something deeper, something elemental. Santa Claus wasn't just a bearer of gifts, he was a figure of moral reckoning. The Dutch didn't merely love him, they respected him, perhaps even feared him. His feast day, December 5th, wasn't just a celebration, it was a reckoning of the soul, a ritual that tied the mundane to the sacred. His arrival marked a season of transformation, a pause in the bleakness of winter to reflect on one's deeds. But this figure wasn't born from the air. The Santa Claus tradition carried the imprint of its pagan past, echoes of Odin's wild hunt and Yule's spectral processions woven into the saint's noble stride. Even the white horse, a marigo, bore an eerie resemblance to Sleipnir, Odin's eight-legged steed that galloped through the winter skies. When the Dutch carried Santa Claus across the Atlantic to the shores of the New World, his character began to change. The solemn bishop would soften, reshaped by the fertile soil of American imagination. His robes would grow plush, his horse traded for a team of reindeer. The chimney-climbing Zwart Piet would be swept away, leaving only the faintest trace in the memory of stockings hung by the fire. Santa Claus's shadow would stretch far, becoming something at once simpler and more complex. But in the quiet corners of the Netherlands, he remains. The children still place their boots by the door, still sing their songs in the flickering light of candles. They know the man who moves through the night is not just a symbol, but a living thread connecting them to the past. And even as the tale evolves, his figure still carries the weight of judgment and grace, the duality that has always defined the winter's darkest nights. As his transformation spread across oceans, Santa Claus would meet the faces of other legends, blending and bending, forging a figure who would carry gifts not just for a single night, but for the long cold stretch of the season. A figure who could smile in the light yet still carry the shadows of the old tales. The frost clung to the bare branches, painting the English countryside in shimmering white. In the flickering glow of hearth fires, families gathered, their voices mingling with the crackling wood as the warmth pushed back against the chill of December. Outside, the winds carried a different story, an older one. A figure moved among the shadows of the yew trees and holly bushes, his cloak thick and his beard long. He wasn't the joyous, jolly man we recognize today, but a presence rooted in the very earth itself, Father Christmas, the embodiment of winter's mysteries. He was no saint, no bishop. There were no mitres or croziers here, no holy robes. Instead, he wore the greens and browns of the land, adorned with ivy and holly berries, his cloak heavy with the scent of pine and wood smoke. His boots were muddied from the forest floor, his breath misted in the cold air. Father Christmas wasn't tied to morality or judgment, he was the spirit of abundance, feasting, and fellowship. He came not to remind people of their sins, but to bring a moment of respite in the darkest days of the year. In the medieval halls of England, his presence was felt in the roaring feasts and overflowing cups of ale. The lord of the manor, seated at the head of the table, would declare the 12 days of Christmas, a time of merriment and excess. Father Christmas was the unspoken host of these revelries, a figure who invited laughter and indulgence, a counterpoint to the grim realities of winter's bite. Yet his roots ran even deeper, back to the pagan spirits who once roamed these lands. He bore the echoes of the Green Man, the woodland deity of fertility and renewal, and the ancient concept of the Lord of Misrule, who turned the world upside down for a brief, wild moment. His was a role that merged chaos with order, ensuring that even in the harshest of times, joy and togetherness could prevail. As England changed, so did he. The Puritan era sought to banish Christmas itself, calling it a sinful indulgence. But Father Christmas endured, slipping into the cracks of the people's hearts and homes. He became a symbol of defiance, a quiet rebellion against the austerity of the times. Artists and poets began to revive him in their works, crafting an image that resonated with nostalgia and longing for the warmth of bygone days. By the Victorian era, Father Christmas began to transform again. He was no longer just the earthy spirit of feasting and celebration, he became a figure of kindness and cheer. Charles Dickens captured his essence in A Christmas Carol, where the ghost of Christmas Present, clad in green robes and surrounded by plenty, bore a striking resemblance to the older depictions of Father Christmas. But there was something wistful in his smile, a recognition of time's passage and the fleeting nature of joy. He traveled through the years, shaped by the hands of those who needed him. His image softened, his once wild edges tamed by the Victorian ideal of family and charity. His roots as a pagan figure blurred, yet they never truly vanished. Beneath the rosy cheeks and warm smile, the ancient spirit still lingered, quietly reminding those who knew where to look that he was as much a part of the earth as the holly wreaths that adorned their doors. Father Christmas wasn't alone in this evolution. Across the seas, other figures of winter were being reimagined. Their stories began to intertwine, their identities merging in ways that would create something entirely new. The English countryside, with its frost-covered fields and snow-dusted evergreens, would soon find itself part of a larger tapestry, one that stretched beyond its borders. The figure who emerged carried the essence of Father Christmas, but bore the influence of legends from far and wide, his face growing ever more familiar, and yet ever more distant from the man who once walked among the yew trees. The air was crisp, the kind that stung the lungs but made every breath feel alive. In shop windows, warm lights flickered against the encroaching twilight of December, casting a glow that seemed to promise comfort and joy. Somewhere, a child gazed at a jolly, red-suited figure painted on a billboard, his round face beaming and his cheeks as rosy as the apples on the Christmas table. But behind the laughter and cheer, behind the bottles of fizzy delight and the promises of holiday magic, lay a story that wasn't quite what it seemed. This was Santa Claus, or so they said. But the truth of that figure, with his fur-lined coat and impossibly merry eyes, was more complex than the world was told. The myth had taken on a life of its own, and at its heart stood the image that millions came to know as Santa, the creation of Coca-Cola. It was the 1930s, and the world was in the grip of the Great Depression. Coca-Cola, struggling to maintain relevance in winter months, saw an opportunity. Christmas was already a season of warmth and nostalgia, a time when people sought comfort amidst the cold. But what the season lacked was a unifying face, a figure who could embody everything Coca-Cola wanted to sell: joy, generosity, and togetherness. They didn't invent Santa Claus. That much is true. The figure of St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, and Father Christmas had existed for centuries, and their stories had blended into something akin to the Santa of today by the late 19th century. But Santa's appearance was far from standardized. Some depictions showed him as a lean, almost gaunt man, others gave him a stern, almost forbidding presence. What Coca-Cola did was redefine him, fix him in a single, unforgettable image. The artist hired for this transformation was Haddon Sundblom. Tasked with creating a Santa who would resonate with Coca-Cola's vision, Sundblom painted a man who was both larger than life and deeply approachable. He had a round belly that seemed to shake with every laugh, twinkling eyes that invited trust, and a warmth that radiated through the canvas. His suit, bright red and trimmed with white fur, became iconic, though the color choice was more a nod to St. Nicholas's bishop's robes and Coca-Cola's branding than an invention of the company itself. What Sundblom did was genius. He turned Santa into a reflection of the American ideal, jovial, generous, and endlessly kind. This Santa wasn't the moral arbiter of old, nor was he a pagan spirit of the woods. He was the embodiment of commercialized joy, a figure as approachable as a bottle of Coke. In his hands, Santa no longer walked a thin line between reward and punishment. Instead, he became a giver of boundless gifts, a figure who asked for nothing in return but a moment of shared happiness. The campaign was wildly successful. Sundblom's Santa appeared everywhere, on posters, in magazine ads, even in storefront windows. And with every passing year, the lines blurred further. The public began to associate this red-suited figure with the very essence of Christmas, forgetting that the image was not born from folklore but from the needs of a corporate brand. Yet the myth persisted. Coca-Cola didn't create Santa Claus, the company insisted. And they were right, in a way. The stories of St. Nicholas, the Yule traditions, and Father Christmas existed long before their time. But they had reshaped him, molded his image to fit their narrative, and sold him to the world as if he had always been this way. The truth lay buried beneath layers of nostalgia, advertisement, and time. But something unsettling lingered beneath the surface. What was lost in the creation of this Santa? The shadows that had once given him depth, the wild spirit of Yule, the fierce protector of children, the judge of moral character, were smoothed away. What remained was a figure of comfort, stripped of the complexities that made him human, or even divine. He was everywhere and nowhere, his presence hollow yet omnipresent. Even today, as his face smiles down from billboards and his figure graces the shelves of every store, there's an unease that lingers, a quiet question that remains unanswered. Was this transformation a gift to the world, or was it a theft of something ancient, something raw? And as the Coca-Cola Santa steps further into the spotlight, the echoes of those old stories whisper, reminding us that even the brightest lights cast shadows. Those shadows, long and twisting, lead us to what comes next, the point where myth meets marketing, and where Santa's past begins to haunt his present. The winter wind howled through the alpine valleys, a relentless force that clawed at shutters and rattled doors. The nights were long, stretching endlessly, and the snow-covered peaks loomed like watchful sentinels over the villages below. Inside, families huddled together, their laughter tinged with unease as they told stories by the fire. And always, there was the warning, behave, or Krampus will come. He wasn't a shadow, exactly. Shadows are silent, fleeting. Krampus was something heavier, something that lingered in the mind long after the fire had died and the stories had ended. His figure, half man, half beast, stood at the edge of the human imagination, impossible to ignore. Horns spiraled from his head like a demon crowned by nature itself, and his eyes burned with a feral intelligence that promised no mercy. Chains clinked as he moved, a sound that made children freeze in their tracks. But it was the sack slung over his shoulder that inspired the most fear. It wasn't for gifts or toys. It was for the children, the disobedient, the disrespectful, the ones who had dared to defy the fragile order of their world. Krampus didn't merely reprimand. He punished. The story said he carried the wayward away, far from the warmth of the hearth, to places no one dared to imagine. He wasn't Santa Claus's opposite. No, Krampus was his shadow, his dark reflection. Where Santa rewarded, Krampus disciplined. Where Santa brought joy, Krampus delivered fear. Together, they were two sides of the same coin, a balance of light and darkness that echoed the dualities of human nature. Without Krampus, Santa's gifts might have felt meaningless. Without Santa, Krampus's punishments would have been too unbearable to contemplate. The people of the Alps understood this balance well. On the night of December 5th, known as Krampusnacht, the lines between the everyday and the otherworldly blurred. Young men dressed in terrifying masks and shaggy fur paraded through the streets, brandishing whips and rattling chains. They weren't just playing a part, they were embodying a force that had lived in the region's psyche for centuries. Children clutched their parents, some crying, some staring wide-eyed as the figures passed. The message was clear: goodness was rewarded, but wickedness would not go unanswered. But who was Krampus, really? His origins weren't born from Christianity but from something older, something rooted in the forests and mountains of pre-Christian Europe. He was tied to the ancient gods, particularly figures like the horned deities who symbolized fertility, the untamed wilderness, and the brutal cycles of nature. Over time, as Christianity spread, these pagan spirits were rebranded as demons, and Krampus was no exception. Yet he endured. No church edict, no attempt to sanitize the season, could erase him completely. Instead, Krampus adapted, slipping into the Christian framework as St. Nicholas's sinister companion. The church may have tried to tame him, but in the flickering firelight of alpine villages, his wild essence remained. Parents whispered his name not as a relic of superstition, but as a living warning, a reminder that every choice carried weight. There's something primal about Krampus, something that resonates even now. He speaks to the part of us that knows the world isn't all sweetness and light, that understands the need for consequences alongside rewards. In a season that celebrates warmth and generosity, he stands as a stark counterbalance, a figure who reminds us that joy cannot exist without fear, nor light without darkness. And yet, he isn't entirely malevolent. Some stories say that Krampus isn't indiscriminate in his punishments. He spares those who show true remorse, those who understand the weight of their actions. In his own twisted way, he teaches lessons that Santa cannot. The night grows darker, the fire burns lower, and somewhere, the faint echo of change drifts through the air. The villagers listen closely, their faces lit with the flickering glow of the flames. It's said that if you listen hard enough, you can hear him moving through the forests, his hooves crunching in the snow. Whether he's coming closer or fading away depends entirely on what lies in your heart. And when morning comes, the two figures, one bathed in light, the other shrouded in shadow, will linger in the stories told again and again. But the shadows that Krampus casts always lead to something more, something just as haunting, waiting in the next tale. The sharp, biting wind of the Rhineland swept through the bare trees, carrying with it the sound of footsteps on frozen ground. Children dared not venture outside after dark, their imaginations alive with tales of a figure who walked the forests cloaked in mystery and menace. His name was Belsnickel, and his presence was a warning as much as it was a promise. He wasn't jolly, nor was he entirely cruel. Wrapped in tattered furs and patched clothes, Belsnickel bore the rough look of someone who had stepped out of the wilderness itself. His face, often obscured by soot or hidden beneath a mask, was a mystery to all but the bravest, or most foolish, who dared to look too closely. His hands carried gifts and punishments alike, the duality of his nature impossible to predict. For the good children, he brought treats, nuts, fruits, and perhaps a small toy, each carefully doled out with a sharp eye for sincerity. For the mischievous, his switch, a bundle of birch branches bound together, was a silent promise that bad behavior would not go unnoticed. He didn't need to chase or threaten. His mere presence, standing tall in the doorway or at the edge of the village square, was enough to send shivers down every spine. Belsnickel's origins were as tangled as the forests he seemed to call home. Some whispered that he was a relic of pre-Christian spirits, a keeper of the wilderness who refused to fade with the arrival of new faiths. Others claimed he was a manifestation of St. Nicholas's justice, a shadowy figure who balanced the saint's mercy with stern discipline. Whatever his beginnings, Belsnickel carved a place for himself in the folklore of German-speaking Europe, and later in the New World where settlers carried his legend. But he was not alone. Across the continent, similar figures haunted winter nights, each with their own peculiar blend of reward and retribution. In Austria, there was Frau Perkte, a stern matron whose gaze could pierce the soul. She carried gifts for those who worked diligently and followed the rules, but her wrath was infamous. Legends told of her punishing the lazy and dishonest by slashing open their bellies and stuffing them with straw, a grotesque reminder of the consequences of moral failing. In parts of Italy, La Befana roamed the skies, her broomstick cutting through the cold January air. Unlike Belsnickel's rugged appearance, La Befana was often depicted as a crone, her face lined with age but her hands still capable of both kindness and punishment. She visited children on the eve of Epiphany, leaving gifts for the virtuous and coal or ashes for the wayward. Yet even in her sternness, there was a warmth, a quiet, maternal care that balanced her severe demeanor. Meanwhile, in Iceland, the Yule lads brought chaos and mischief to the season. Unlike Belsnickel's solitary figure, these 13 tricksters descended one by one in the days leading to Christmas. Each had their own peculiar quirk, from stealing food to slamming doors, and they left behind small gifts, or rotten potatoes, depending on the behavior of the household's children. Accompanied by their terrifying mother, Gryla, and the monstrous Yule cat, the lads reminded families that winter's magic was as much about survival as it was about celebration. What united these figures, Belsnickel, Frau Perkta, La Befana, and the Yule lads, was their role as enforcers of a fragile moral order. They weren't symbols of mindless cruelty but reminders of the balance that defined human existence. In the bleakness of winter, when the world seemed poised on the edge of chaos, they stood as forces of accountability. Their switches and scowls were not simply tools of punishment, they were warnings that goodness required vigilance, even in the darkest of times. Yet, as much as they commanded fear, there was a strange comfort in their tales. They were tangible, visceral, in ways that a benevolent Santa Claus could never fully be. They lived in the cracks between the hearth and the forest, in the space where human fear met the raw, untamed world. And in their rugged, imperfect ways, they taught lessons that lingered long after the season's festivities had ended. Even today, as their stories are told and retold, their presence feels oddly grounding. The world may have softened Santa into a figure of boundless cheer, but the enforcers of European lore remain stubbornly real, their wildness a reminder of something primal. Belsnickel still stands at the door, his switch in hand, waiting to see who will face him with honesty, and who will cower behind false smiles. And as his figure fades back into the night, the echoes of his steps blend with those of others yet to come, their lessons haunting the darkened edges of the next tale. The chill of the Scandinavian night settled over the land, thick and unyielding, as stars pricked through the dark sky. Fires flickered in longhouses, their warm glow casting dancing shadows against wooden walls adorned with carvings of gods and beasts. Among them, the image of a goat loomed, its horns curved like crescents, its body strong, defiant. But this was no ordinary creature. The Yule Goat carried within it an ancient, potent power, a symbol of both reverence and dread. It was said that the goat watched, its eyes keen and unyielding, as the longest nights of the year stretched on. In the old days, before Christian hymns replaced the chants of elders, the goat was tied to the gods, especially Thor, the thunder wielder. Thor's chariot, pulled by his two goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjastr, thundered across the heavens, their hooves sparking fire as they carried their master into battle. These goats weren't mere beasts, they were sacred, their lives entwined with the rhythms of death and renewal. Thor, after all, could slaughter and eat them, only to resurrect them from their bones. A cycle as eternal as the changing of the seasons. But the Yule Goat wasn't merely Thor's companion. In the cold silence of the pre-Christian winter, the goat became a focal point for the Yule rituals. Its image wove together themes of fertility, sacrifice, and the ever-present need to appease forces larger than oneself. To the ancient Norse, survival in winter wasn't guaranteed. The Yule Goat was a way of acknowledging that struggle, a figure embodying both the gifts of life and the price they demanded. Sacrifice was the key. Blood spilled on the frozen ground was believed to hold power, an offering to ensure the return of the sun and the fertility of the earth. The goat, strong and stubborn, became a fitting symbol for this exchange. Sometimes a real goat was offered, its life given in the hope that the gods would grant favor to the community. The act was solemn, its weight felt by all who watched, as if the very spirit of Yule hovered in the air, waiting to accept the offering. Over time, as Christianity swept through Scandinavia, the Yule Goat didn't disappear. Instead, it transformed, shedding its darker associations for something more playful, but not entirely innocent. By the Middle Ages, the goat had become a character in festive plays and rituals, often portrayed as mischievous or even devilish. The act of goat riding emerged, where men dressed as goats would visit homes, playing pranks or demanding treats. Yet even in this lighter guise, echoes of the past remained. The goat still symbolized the raw, untamed forces of nature that refused to be fully subdued. In more modern times, the Yule Goat took another turn, morphing into a figure tied to the celebration of Christmas. Straw goats, bound and decorated, began to appear in Scandinavian homes, a nod to the agricultural roots of the region. They were cheerful, festive decorations, but beneath their cheerful appearance, there lingered the memory of their ancestral role as both giver and taker. Even the straw, brittle and golden, felt like a reminder of the fragile line between life and death in winter's grip. And then there was the Gavel Goat, the giant straw Yule Goat erected annually in Sweden's Gavel Town Square. At first glance, it seemed like a harmless tradition, a towering homage to the season. Yet it, too, carried the weight of its history. Year after year, the goat became a target, set aflame by those who saw in its destruction a strange, rebellious echo of its sacrificial past. Fire consumed the straw, licking the dark sky, as if some ancient spirit had been unleashed, demanding acknowledgement. But the Yule Goat is not just a relic of the past. Even today, it stands as a symbol of the contradictions at the heart of winter's celebrations. It is a creature of life and death, of light and shadow, of joy and fear. Its horns curve not only into the heavens, but back into the depths of memory, where the old rituals live on, hidden beneath layers of snow and time. And as the fires burn low, the goat lingers in the stories told around them, its image a bridge to the next chapter, where the shadows of the old gods refuse to fade entirely. The echo of its hooves leads us forward, deeper into the intertwined myths of winter. The night was suffocating, heavy with the promise of something untold. The moon hid behind thick clouds, and the wind howled like a banshee, carrying with it the scent of snow and death. In the distance, the sound of drums echoed through the darkened mountain passes, reverberating off the jagged peaks of the Alps. It was the eerie prelude to something far older than the chill of winter, a procession that could be heard, but never seen. The perch tin were coming. No one knew exactly when the perch tin first appeared. Their origins were lost in the folds of time, buried beneath the weight of centuries, but their legend was alive and thriving in the remote villages of Austria, Bavaria, and beyond. They were spirits of winter, embodiments of chaos and destruction, of doom and purification. Their names were whispered in the dark corners of homes, and their presence in the world was a reminder of the precariousness of life. For the perch tin, there was no line between life and death, only the ceaseless march of time, merciless and unyielding. Draped in furs, their faces obscured by terrifying masks, the perch tin were beings of both beauty and horror. Some wore the heads of snarling wolves, while others had long, gnarled horns protruding from their skulls like the twisted branches of ancient trees. Their eyes burned with an unnatural light, glowing red in the darkness, and their bodies were thick with the grime of the earth, as if they had risen from the depths of the underworld itself. Every year, at the height of winter, the perch tin would descend from their caves, their dens, and their hidden places. They emerged with the first heavy snowfalls, marching through the villages in large, terrifying groups. They were not alone, for accompanying them were the sounds of ancient drums, the loud clanging of metal, and the eerie, melodic chants of old rituals. They were coming to judge, to purge, and to ravage, their very presence shaking the earth and filling the air with dread. These winter spirits were not benevolent. The stories told of them were as dark as the nights they roamed. The perch tin were said to hunt down the wicked, the sinners, the miscreants, dragging them into the snowy abyss to meet their doom. It was not just punishment they brought, it was obliteration. They were the winter's judgment, the cold hand of fate that had no mercy for those who had strayed from the path. And yet, they were also forces of renewal. They scoured the land of impurity, preparing it for the coming of spring. In their terrifying destruction lay the seeds of rebirth. The two types of perch tin were the most fearsome. The Skyets perch tin were the terrifying, grotesque creatures, hideous and foul in their appearance. They represented the destructive forces of winter. Their masks were grotesque, twisted versions of the human face, often with wide, gaping mouths that seemed to mock the world's misery. They carried with them chains, whips, and bells, rattling their noise as they roamed the streets, frightening anyone who dared cross their path. But the Skamperktin were not much less menacing. They were a duality in themselves, beautiful in appearance yet bearing the same judgment as their darker counterparts. These spirits, draped in white, often took on the guise of the maternal or the feminine, but there was no illusion in their beauty. They were still spirits of death and doom, sent to bring balance to the harsh realities of winter's grip. During the Perchtenlauf, or Perchten Run, villagers would gather, dressed as these spirits, parading through the streets to expel evil and ensure a bountiful year ahead. They would dance, scream, and rattle their chains, the night alive with their terrifying energy. The Perchten were there not only to remind the people of their sins, but also to ignite the primal fears that lurked deep within. The ritual was a catharsis, a way to expel the darkness that had gathered over the year. It was through the terror of the Perchten that one could appreciate the hope of the coming spring, though no one ever truly understood if it was a grace or a curse. The frightening part was that the Perchten were not simply confined to myth. There were tales of people vanishing into the night, of children who had misbehaved being swept away by the terrifying procession. Their presence was not just an abstract fear, it was tangible. Parents used the story of the Perchten to discipline their children, warning them that if they strayed too far from the path, the Perchten would come for them. It wasn't just a tale, it was a warning. The Perchten were real, even if they were never seen. In the present day, the Perchten may have become a relic of the past, a frightening tradition for festivals and parades. But the echoes of their footsteps still linger in the mountains, a reminder that the spirits of winter are not as distant as they seem. They remind us that nature is not kind. It does not care for the warmth of human hearts or the gentleness of our intentions. The Perchten are the wrath of winter, unrelenting, unforgiving, and necessary. And as the fires flicker low in the dark, cold wind howls outside, we are left wondering if the Perchten are still waiting, hidden in the folds of the earth, their judgment waiting for the moment to descend once more. For when the winds grow harsh and the snow begins to fall, who can say where they walk next, ready to shape the fate of another soul? The frost on the windows glistened like 1,000 tiny shards of glass, each one a reflection of the fear that gripped the heart of the village. The cold winds of winter were cruel, but the real terror was something more insidious, lurking in the shadows where the firelight couldn't reach. There, in the corners of the hearth, and the creaking of old wooden floors, something darker was at work. It was a presence, shifting just beyond the line of sight, something that had slipped into the folklore and history of countless cultures, an entity that wore the mask of kindness, only to reveal something far more malevolent. This was not just an ancient spirit or a wandering soul. This was the devil in disguise. History had always been full of figures like this, figures who cloaked themselves in the trappings of the divine, wearing the guise of a savior or a saint, only to pull back the veil and show something far darker. And nowhere did this duality play out more sharply than in the figures of myth and tradition that had become part of winter's tapestry. These were the figures who haunted the long nights, who stirred in the shadows when the world slept. They appeared when the snow fell the hardest and the wind howled the loudest. And they were never truly as they seemed. Take, for instance, the figure of Santa Claus, whose benevolent image graced the front of every Christmas card, the jolly old man with the white beard and twinkling eyes. He was a figure of generosity, of warmth, of joy, but if you looked closely at his origins, you would find a figure steeped in far darker elements. Santa, or Saint Nicholas, had been a patron saint of children, but also of sailors, thieves, and those lost in the underworld. In many of his original legends, he was a punisher as much as a rewarder. It was said that he could raise storms at sea to punish the wicked, and some stories even tell of him chasing down the souls of thieves, offering them redemption through a chilling encounter. Beneath the red suit and rosy cheeks, there was something that called to mind an unsettling image of a figure who might just as easily drag you into the shadows as offer you a gift. But it wasn't just Santa. The folklore of Europe was filled with figures who wore the guise of something benevolent, only to reveal their darker nature over time. The most obvious example was Krampus, who had once been a companion of Saint Nicholas. While Saint Nicholas delivered gifts, Krampus took the naughty children and dragged them into the night, where they would face an uncertain fate. He was the embodiment of punishment, his sharp claws and red eyes reminding everyone that the sweet scent of candy could easily turn to the acrid smell of fear. He wasn't a villain in the traditional sense, but a manifestation of nature's most brutal and unforgiving aspect, the harsh, uncaring force that winters could bring. Yet even Krampus, despite his brutal punishments, was also a means of teaching morality. He had a role to play in keeping the balance between good and evil, reward and retribution. But how many children could truly understand that lesson without the fear gnawing at them? And then there was the devil himself. Not a horned creature of flames and fury, but a figure that could walk among us, disguised in the everyday, blending into the backdrop of our lives. He was there in the whispers of the villagers when the snowstorms raged, and the hushed tones as parents warned their children to be good, or else the devil would come. His presence wasn't always marked by fire or brimstone, but by silence, the kind that hung heavy in the air like a curse that could descend at any moment. He wore many faces, but the one that was perhaps the most terrifying was the one that seemed the most human. The devil didn't always come as a monster. Sometimes he came as a traveler, a wanderer, offering warmth to the cold and shelter to the weary. He might offer you a seat by the fire or a cup of something hot, and for a moment, you might think he was a savior, someone sent to guide you through the darkness. But always, there was something unsettling about him. His eyes held a glimmer of something else, something otherworldly. His smile never quite reached his eyes. In some stories, he would offer a bargain, a deal too good to be true. A few coins, a little power, a favor exchanged. But the price, always, was something that could not be repaid. The devil's disguise was not just one of appearance, it was a matter of his ability to manipulate those who crossed his path. He understood human desire, human weakness. He knew how to tempt, how to offer what seemed like salvation only to bind you in chains that were invisible but unbreakable. His gift was a curse, one that no one could escape without paying the price. But the most terrifying thing about these figures was that they weren't just stories. They were warnings, embedded deep in the consciousness of those who had survived the winters of old. The darkness of winter wasn't simply the cold or the snow, it was the uncertainty of what could happen when the rules of the world were bent, when the lines between good and evil blurred. These figures, these spirits, were reminders that we never truly know what's lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true form. As the fire crackles low and the wind howls outside, we are left to wonder, how many of the figures we invite into our lives are really as innocent as they seem? And when the shadows grow long and the air turns icy, who's to say whether the devil is wearing the smile of a friend or something far more sinister? The wind howled through the vast, empty expanses of the Russian countryside, carrying with it the promise of something ancient. The snow, thick and relentless, blanketed the ground in a cold silence, turning the world into an endless sea of white. It was in this frozen wilderness, far from the warmth of hearths and the comfort of firelight, that the story of Dead Moros and the Snow Maiden took root, two figures woven from the very fabric of winter, whose presence filled the nights with both wonder and a foreboding chill. Dead Moros, the old man of frost, was a towering figure. His long, snowy beard flowed down to his chest like a river of ice, his face sharp and weathered by the winds of countless winters. He wore a long coat made of fur, blue and shimmering with the sparkle of frost. In his hand, he carried a staff that seemed to pulse with the power of the cold itself. To the children of Russia, he was the figure of winter's magic, a bringer of gifts, much like the Western image of Santa Claus, but with a darkness in his depths, a reminder that winter's beauty was always tinged with danger. Unlike the warm-hearted, jolly image of Santa Claus, Dead Moros carried with him a sense of the wilderness, untamed, fierce, and unpredictable. He wasn't a figure who simply arrived with the soft tinkling of sleigh bells and cheerful laughter. No, Dead Moros came with the biting cold winds and the crunch of snow beneath his boots. He would travel the snowy paths of the Russian forests, his sleigh drawn not by reindeer but by 3 powerful horses, their hooves pounding the earth, sending the snow flying in all directions. His appearance was both magical and ominous. He was as much a force of nature as he was a man. And yet, there was something more about him. He was not the solitary figure of winter that some might imagine. He had his companion, the Snow Maiden, or Sneguraka. A delicate, ethereal figure, she was the embodiment of winter's gentler side. Her skin, pale and smooth as snow, seemed to glow in the soft moonlight, her long hair cascading like threads of ice. Dressed in a gown of silver and white, she moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, as if she were part of the very snow that fell around her. Her presence brought a soft, enchanting beauty to the harsh Russian winters, like the delicate frost that covered trees in the early mornings, fragile and fleeting. But there was more to Sneguraka than her beauty and grace. The Snow Maiden was not simply a figure of purity and light. Her origins were shrouded in the kind of sorrow that only winter could bring. Born from the coldest reaches of winter, Sneguraka was the daughter of dead Moros and the spirit of the frosty landscape. Some stories tell of her being created from snow, shaped by her father's icy touch. Other versions of the tale say that she was a mortal girl, turned into snow by the touch of her father's frost after a tragic end. Whatever the truth, the Snow Maiden was a child of winter's dark magic, and her fate was tied to the very season that gave her life. Together, dead Moros and Sneguraka traveled across the Russian lands, visiting villages, bringing gifts to the children, and spreading the magic of winter. But their visits were always bittersweet. For in the tale of Sneguraka, there was always a warning that even the beauty of winter could not last forever. In some versions of the story, the Snow Maiden, whose heart was pure, longed for warmth and love, the very things that could melt her. And so, each winter, she would fall in love with the warmth of the earth, only to feel herself slowly fading away, as if her very existence was tied to the cold, to the frost, to the ice. The colder the world became, the more she thrived. The warmer it became, the more she withered, her form disintegrating into nothingness as the sun's touch weakened her. Her tragic fate was a reminder of the transience of winter's magic, how something so beautiful and pure could also be fleeting and fragile. It was said that Sneguraka would always long for the warmth that could bring her to life, but she could never have it. Her existence was a paradox, born of ice, yearning for the heat that could set her free, but knowing she would never have it. Each year, she would emerge from the snow, only to disappear again when the first signs of spring appeared. But in the presence of dead Moros and Sneguraka, winter was alive, full of mystery, magic, and unspoken sadness. They were not simply figures of celebration, but embodiments of winter's dual nature, its beauty and its cold indifference. Dead Moros could bring joy and warmth in the form of gifts, but he also carried with him the sharp bite of winter, reminding all who crossed his path that life was as fragile as the snowflakes falling from the sky. Sneguraka, his delicate companion, was the perfect contrast to his cold, formidable power, her presence like a reminder of the fleeting nature of life, of the innocence that could never last. As winter deepened, and the snow continued to fall in a thick, silent blanket, the figures of dead Moros and Sneguraka remained. They were not simply figures of myth, but reflections of the land they ruled, cold, powerful, beautiful, and full of sorrow. And as the long winter nights stretched on, the shadows of these figures would dance in the flickering candlelight, a reminder that the cold was never just a season, but a force that shaped the very stories that defined the people who lived within it. The wind in the Italian countryside carried the scent of pine and cold stone, the air crisp with the weight of winter's grip. As the nights grew longer and the days shorter, something strange stirred in the hearts of the people, a tale, dark and whimsical, that would warm the soul while sending shivers down the spine. It was the story of La Befana, the Christmas witch, who rode her broom through the winter skies, her presence an enigma wrapped in mystery and magic. La Befana was not the sweet, cuddly figure of a grandmotherly witch that the world often imagined. No, she was something far older, far more complex, and much more connected to the land she roamed. The tale of La Befana began long before Christmas itself, in the quiet reaches of ancient Italy, where folklore was as much a part of daily life as the food they ate or the prayers they whispered before bed. La Befana's origins were tangled, hard to trace, but her significance had been forged in centuries of myth and mystery. She was said to be a crone, dressed in tattered clothing, her face obscured by a shadow of age, but in her eyes, there was something that never faded, the spark of magic, of power, of something beyond time. La Befana was a woman of contradiction, both feared and loved, benevolent and frightening, ancient yet timeless. She lived alone in her small, humble house, far from the noise of the world, in a small village where the snow often blanketed the rooftops in thick, suffocating silence. And while she was thought to be a figure of folklore, in the depths of winter, it was as if she came alive once more. Every year, on the night of January 5th, La Befana would take to the skies, flying through the air on her broomstick, visiting children all over Italy. But she was no ordinary gift-bringer. Unlike the warm, jolly figures of other Christmas traditions, La Befana was far more practical. She delivered not just sweets, but also coal. For those who had been good, she left treats like honey and cakes, little tokens of love and care. But for those who had misbehaved, the lumps of coal were a reminder of their mistakes, a warning that no one could escape the consequences of their actions. Some say La Befana's journey began on the night when the three kings traveled to visit the newborn Christ. As the story goes, La Befana was a young woman then, living in a humble house of her own, content in her simple life. One fateful night, she encountered the kings as they made their way to Bethlehem. They invited her to join them on their journey, to follow the star and witness the miracle of Christ's birth. But La Befana was busy. She had her house to tend to, her chores to complete, and she declined their invitation, not thinking it would be the decision that would shape her destiny. Later, when the kings had gone, La Befana felt the deep, gnawing regret of her refusal. She realized she had missed the chance to witness something greater than anything she could have imagined. Driven by guilt, she gathered up gifts, simple things, humble offerings of love, and set out to find the child they had spoken of. But by the time she reached Bethlehem, the Holy Family had already moved on. Disheartened, La Befana turned back, but she vowed that every year, she would search for the child and bring gifts to all the children she could find, hoping that somehow, she could make up for the moment she had lost. Thus, each year, La Befana flies through the sky, delivering gifts to children everywhere, as a reminder that it is never too late to seek redemption. Her story, wrapped in sorrow and the pursuit of redemption, filled the long winter nights with both mystery and meaning. Her journey was not one of merry joy, but of quiet reflection, a pilgrimage through the cold to make amends for a mistake long past. And in every home she visited, she reminded the children of Italy that Christmas was not just about presents and cheer, but about the choices they made, the kindness they showed, and the way they lived. The image of La Befana was not one of sweetness or gentleness. She was a figure that carried the weight of her own regrets, a character marked by the complex duality of love and punishment. Her broomstick was not just a vehicle for delivering gifts, it was a symbol of the difficult choices she had made and the journey she was on. Every year, she returned, hoping to find the Christ child, hoping that her gifts would bring some peace to her restless soul. She was not perfect, and her magic was never about perfect gifts. It was about the act of giving, of seeking redemption, of making right the wrongs that haunted her. Yet, for all her darkness and the shadow that hung over her story, La Befana was beloved. She was a part of Italy's Christmas tradition, a figure of both joy and reflection. The children awaited her arrival eagerly, hoping for sweets, but also fearing the cold that might come as a sign of their misdeeds. In this way, La Befana reminded them that Christmas was more than just a holiday of celebration. It was a time of reckoning, of acknowledging both the good and the bad, the mistakes and the successes, the kindness and the cruelty. As the midnight bells rang on the eve of Epiphany, and the streets lay still beneath a blanket of snow, La Befana would be on her way again. Her broomstick would cut through the cold, and her gifts would find their way into the homes of the children. Somewhere in the quiet, between the whispers of the wind, the voice of La Befana could be heard, reminding all who listened that no matter how far we wander, or how many mistakes we make, there is always a way back, through the magic of giving, of loving, and of seeking redemption. And in her shadow, the children of Italy would dream of her journey, their hearts filled with the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could be a little better in the years to come. The snow fell in delicate, swirling patterns as the evening grew darker. In the east, winter carried with it a quiet, almost otherworldly sense of mystery. The cold winds that whispered through the streets of China and Japan were laden with ancient stories, tales that had been passed down through generations, where the magic of winter was interpreted not just as a time of festive joy, but also as a moment of reflection, reverence, and fear. There, in the soft glow of lantern light and the rustling of paper doors, the spirits of winter were very real, and their presence was as tangible as the frost on the bamboo leaves. These were the lands where the story of gift-bringers took on darker, more intricate forms, where the mythologies of old intertwined with the changing seasons. In Japan, the figure of the New Year's gift-bringer was not a man dressed in a red suit or a jolly spirit of generosity. Instead, they revered the presence of Ashigatsu, the New Year itself, brought to them through the revered Tashigami, the deity of the year. Tashigami was not simply the god of celebration. He was the one who carried the blessing of a new year, who brought both prosperity and warning. As the first day of January arrived, families would leave offerings of rice cakes, sacred decorations, and fruit to honor him. But this wasn't a simple ritual of hope, there was something deeper at play. The offerings left out for Tashigami were believed to summon good fortune, but in doing so, families also faced the reality that the blessings of the new year came at a cost. Just as the cold could bite, it could also nourish, and just as Tashigami brought his gifts, there was a reminder in the air: no gift came without some form of sacrifice. In this land where tradition and spirituality wove seamlessly into everyday life, the story of the Yukiana, the snow woman, emerged from the snowy mountains to remind the people that winter could be both a blessing and a curse. The Yukiana was no mere snow spirit. She was a ghostly apparition, a woman whose beauty seemed to melt into the snow itself. In some versions of her tale, she was a benevolent figure, offering protection to those lost in the snow, guiding travelers through the icy wilderness. But in others, she was a harbinger of death. Her pale skin, her piercing, cold eyes, her icy breath, she was a figure who both offered and took life. The Yukiana was a reminder that winter was a force that held both the gift of life and the threat of death. She was both a blessing and a warning, a figure who could offer warmth or take it away in a breath. Her presence lingered like the chill that crept into the bones, unseen yet always felt. Across the sea, in China, winter brought with it its own set of powerful spirits, spirits whose reach stretched far beyond the simple tales of Christmas or New Year's Day. The Chinese interpretation of winter and the spirits who walked the earth during this time was steeped in ancient traditions that celebrated both the dead and the living. The most notable was Dongji, the winter solstice festival, a time when the balance of yin and yang reached its peak. It was said that during this time, the forces of darkness were at their strongest, and families honored their ancestors by offering food, incense, and prayers. It was a time for reflection, a time when the dead were remembered and their spirits appeased. But within this tradition was also a fear of the Yin, a mythical beast that came during the darkest days of winter. According to legend, the Yin would emerge from the mountains, searching for children to devour, until one year, the villagers discovered that the creature was terrified of loud noises, fire, and the color red. Thus began the traditions of setting off fireworks and wearing red clothing during the celebrations of the new year. The Yin was no simple monster, it was a figure that embodied the harsh, uncaring aspects of winter, a reminder of how fragile life could be when the forces of nature were unchecked. The creature was a manifestation of winter's cruelty, its power to take life, to ravage the innocent. Yet, through cunning and courage, the villagers learned to repel the Yin, and so the story became one of triumph. The lights, the firecrackers, the decorations, they were not just symbols of celebration but acts of defiance against the darkness of winter, a refusal to be overtaken by the cold and the creatures that stalked its depths. In the same way that the Yukiana would either protect or destroy, the Yin was a reminder that winter's magic could be both life-giving and deadly, but the human spirit, when united, could fight back. In both Japan and China, winter was not simply a time of festivities, but a season that demanded respect, reverence, and reflection. The spirits of the cold were not just figures who brought gifts and joy. They were figures who embodied the duality of winter, its ability to nurture and its ability to destroy. These spirits could offer protection, warmth, and bounty, but they also carried with them a warning: nothing in winter was ever truly safe. The Yukiana, the Yin, Tashigami, they were all forces beyond human control, ancient spirits who moved through the cold with an urgency that matched the drop in temperature. And in their wake, they left behind stories of both sorrow and joy, of light and dark, of life and death, ever reminding those who lived in their shadow that the season of winter was as much about survival as it was about celebration. And so, in the silence of the winter night, With the snow drifting down and the winds howling through the trees, the people of China and Japan would remember these spirits, the gift bringers, the protectors, the destroyers, knowing that no matter how much time passed, winter would always come again. And with it, the spirits would return, with gifts or with warning, with warmth or with cold, and the cycle would begin anew. The night had fallen heavy, and the northern lights danced across the sky in hues of green and purple, as though the very heavens were alive with the pulse of magic. Beneath the shimmering lights, in the farthest reaches of the Arctic Circle, the Sami people of Scandinavia gathered in the quiet of the long winter night. It was here, in the coldest corners of the world, that a story, rich in mysticism and ancient power, would unfold, a story that carried the weight of the earth and the spirit of the snow. The Sami believed in forces that could not be explained by mere reason, forces that connected them to the land, to the animals, and to the spirits that walked the earth long before humankind. Among these forces was the Sami shaman, a figure whose powers were as vast as the snow-covered tundra and whose connection to the spirit world was as ancient as the stars themselves. The Sami shaman was not a figure of fear, nor one of mere superstition. To the Sami, the shaman was a bridge between worlds, the material and the spiritual, the living and the dead, the human and the divine. They were the healers, the spiritual leaders, the keepers of traditions that stretched back millennia. The shaman's role was not only to guide their people through the harsh winters, but also to maintain balance with the spirits of nature, those who dwelled in the winds, the trees, and the icy rivers. To them, the world was alive with energies that could be called upon for good or ill, depending on the balance kept with the unseen forces. The most mysterious part of the Sami shaman's life, however, was the way they communicated with the spirits. It was said that when a shaman went into trance, they left their bodies behind, entering the spirit world in search of guidance, knowledge, or even revenge. They would ride reindeer through the snowy landscapes of the afterlife, their bodies curled in deep concentration, while their souls journeyed through realms of mist and shadow. The reindeer, revered for their strength and grace, were seen as spiritual guides themselves, capable of taking the shaman to places where humans could not tread. But it wasn't just through trance that the shaman connected with the world of spirits. They also used yoiks, ancient chants that carried the power to call upon the spirits, to heal, to protect, and even to curse. The yoiks were not just songs, they were prayers woven into melody, ancient words that resonated deep within the soul. When a shaman sang a yoik, the air itself seemed to shift, as if the very world around them was listening. Through these powerful chants, shamans could communicate with the Arjal, the spirits of the deceased, and invoke the aid of powerful forces that shaped the world. And yet, for all their power, the Sami shamans were not the sole masters of the winter spirits. There was another figure who stalked the cold landscapes of the north, a shadowy presence who was as much a protector as a punisher, a figure known as Joulupuki, the Father Christmas of the Sami people. The Joulupuki was no jovial, rotund man in a red suit. No, he was an ancient being, part of the deep, wild world of the Sami. He was the guardian of the wilderness, a protector who punished those who dared to disturb the natural order, and a giver of gifts to those who respected the land and its ways. The Joulupuki was closely connected to the shamanic practices of the Sami. He was believed to travel the snowy forests, moving between the realms of the living and the dead, carrying gifts for the worthy and punishments for the disrespectful. It was said that Joulupuki came from the forests themselves, emerging from the darkness to visit children and families on the longest night of the year, the winter solstice. His gifts were not just tokens of joy, but a reminder of the power of nature, the necessity of balance between the human and the spiritual realms. But what made Joulupuki truly frightening was his connection to the Sami shaman. In ancient times, the shaman would don the guise of a reindeer herder, wearing a fur cloak and a wooden staff, much like the Joulupuki. They would enter the villages, not with the expectation of celebration, but with the weight of responsibility. The gifts they brought were tied to the people's deeds, their respect for nature and their adherence to the traditions that had been passed down through generations. A shaman's visit was not a time of indulgence, it was a time of reckoning, where the land and the people were judged, and where the spirits would make their presence known. This connection between the shaman and the Joulupuki was not one of mere coincidence. In Sami tradition, the shaman was believed to be able to move between the worlds, just as Joulupuki did, traveling the boundaries between life and death, the material and the spiritual. The shaman would visit homes in the dead of winter, much like the Joulupuki, bringing both gifts and warnings. In this way, the Sami saw their shaman not just as a healer, but as a figure who, much like the Joulupuki, had the power to move between realms, shaping fate with their chants and actions. The shaman's relationship with Joulupuki was a reflection of the land's power, its ability to both nurture and punish, to create life and to take it away in the blink of an eye. In the eyes of the Sami, the cold was not something to fear. It was a force of nature, both necessary and terrifying, and it demanded respect. The Sami shaman, with their ancient chants and sacred dances, held the key to understanding and surviving the long winter nights. They were not simply religious leaders, they were spiritual warriors, standing between the people and the unseen forces of the earth. Their connection to Joulupuki was a reminder that the spirits of winter were not to be trifled with. They could bring gifts and warmth, but they could also bring darkness and death. The shaman understood this better than anyone, for they had glimpsed the true nature of winter's power, and they alone knew how to harness it. And so, in the flickering light of the fire, as the wind howled outside and the northern lights danced across the sky, the Sami people would offer their prayers, their chants, and their respect to the spirits of winter. For they knew that the shaman and the Joulupuki were not just figures of myth, but reminders of the forces that shaped their world, a world of ice, of fire, of life, and of death, where the boundary between the living and the dead was never quite as clear as it seemed. The cold wind howled through the dense trees, cutting through the forests like a silent warning. The land, blanketed in snow, stretched out far and wide. It was here, in the silence of the untouched wilderness, that the stories of indigenous peoples came alive, weaving together a complex tapestry of respect, reverence, and deep connection to the natural world. For them, the holiday season was not merely a time of celebration, but a sacred moment, a reflection of the balance between the earth, the spirits, and the people. Among many indigenous cultures, winter held a special place. It was a time of both hardship and beauty, a season that could take life away with its cold fingers, but also one that brought forth new growth in the spring. The land was a living entity, and the rituals that marked the arrival of winter and its turning into a new cycle were as ancient as the earth itself. These rituals were not bound to a calendar date like in Western Christmas traditions. Instead, they were woven into the very fabric of the seasons, aligning with the cycles of nature, the animal migrations, and the celestial movements in the sky. For the Native American tribes of the Great Plains, the arrival of winter marked the time of the midwinter ceremony, a time when the people gave thanks for the harvest, honored their ancestors, and sought the blessings of the spirits for the coming year. It wasn't a time for excess or indulgence, but rather for deep reflection. The ceremonies were rooted in the belief that the winter months were a time of spiritual renewal, where the old would be shed and the new would be born. The Lakota Sioux, for example, held the Wiaya Waste, the first winter ceremony, in December. The gathering was a time for fasting, praying, and singing in honor of the spirits that protected the people through the cold. The ceremony was designed to ensure that the community would survive the harsh winter, but it was also about embracing the quiet stillness of the season, where the energy of the world slowed down, allowing space for inner reflection and spiritual growth. Gifts were exchanged, but these gifts were often symbolic, representing the spiritual and physical nourishment that the people needed to endure. The holiday was about connection, not only to one another but to the very land that sustained them. In the north, the Inuit people had their own winter traditions, closely tied to their harsh environment. The dark months, stretching for what seemed like an eternity, were filled with spiritual importance. The Inuit marked the solstice with celebrations, not just as a time to endure the darkness, but to honor the return of the sun. The sun's return was not only a physical event, but a spiritual one, symbolizing hope, renewal, and the cyclical nature of life. It was a time to share stories, to honor ancestors, and to ensure the survival of their communities through deepening relationships with their surroundings. In the Arctic regions, the winter months were also a time for families to gather in their igloos, to share warmth and food, and to give thanks for the animals that provided sustenance. The animals were revered, not just as food sources, but as spirit beings with their own will and wisdom. A successful hunt, which took place during the winter months, was considered a gift from the spirit world, and the hunter's role was not only to provide for the family but to honor the animal spirits that had given their lives. This deep connection between the indigenous peoples of the North and the animals shaped their rituals as well as their worldview. Winter was not about material excess, but about the sacred responsibility of living in harmony with the earth. Further south, in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, the indigenous tribes celebrated the return of winter with feasts, dances, and ceremonies centered around the gifts of the land. The winter months were a time of storytelling, where the elders would pass down ancient knowledge, lessons, and myths to the younger generations. These stories carried with them teachings about respect, balance, and the interconnectedness of all life. For the coastal tribes, the salmon, whales, and seals were not merely creatures of the ocean, they were kin, brothers, and sisters who needed to be treated with reverence and respect. The giving of gifts was often tied to the balance of nature, with every offering made in return for a gift from the earth. The gift exchange among indigenous peoples was never about materialism. Unlike the Western Christmas tradition of buying gifts for the sake of consumption, the indigenous perspective of gift-giving was based on reciprocity. The gifts exchanged were often symbolic, representing the earth's bounty, the strength of family, and the ties that bound them to one another and to their ancestors. In many ways, these gifts served to honor the ongoing relationship with the land and its spirits, ensuring that the balance of nature was respected. For the Ojibwe people of the Great Lakes, the winter months were a time to hold the midwinter feast and offer prayers to the Creator. This feast was about sustaining the community, but it was also about acknowledging the hardships of winter and giving thanks for the resilience of the people. It was a time when people would come together to share food, songs, and prayers, and to prepare for the renewal that would come with the changing of the seasons. For them, winter was not just a time of cold, it was a time of honoring the earth's quiet power, of accepting the lessons of hardship, and of preparing for the rebirth that would come in spring. In many indigenous cultures, the holiday season was less about a singular day of festivity and more about a season of renewal, reflection, and respect for the earth. The winter months, with their cold, silence, and darkness, were a time to reconnect with what truly mattered: community, family, and the sacred relationship with nature. It was a time to honor the spirits that shaped the world, to give thanks for the gifts of the earth, and to prepare for the renewal that would come when the first thaw of spring broke through the cold ground. The season was a reminder that everything in life, whether it be human or animal, plant or spirit, was interconnected, and that in order to survive, one must honor the balance between all things. As the long winter nights settled over the land, the indigenous peoples knew that their survival depended on much more than just food and shelter. It was their deep connection to the land, to each other, and to the spirits that sustained them. For them, the holiday season was not just a time of celebration, it was a time of sacred duty, where every action, every ritual, every prayer, was done with the utmost respect for the earth that cradled them. In this quiet, cold season, the world was alive with the spirit of the land, the animals, and the ancestors. And through their rituals, they ensured that the balance would continue, guiding them through the darkness and into the light once again. It was the early 19th century, and London's streets were crowded with horse-drawn carriages, the clatter of hooves on cobblestone filling the air. The smell of roasting chestnuts mixed with the scent of cold winter air, but beneath the bustle of the city, something far more profound was unfolding, a quiet revolution that would change the course of history. The holiday season was being reimagined, reshaped by the desires of a society desperate to cling to the warmth of family, tradition, and optimism. What emerged during this time was not just a new way of celebrating Christmas, but a vision of a world where hope, generosity, and kindness could flourish even in the face of harsh realities. In the heart of this transformation stood Charles Dickens, whose words would become the foundation of a new vision for Christmas. It was in 1843 that Dickens penned A Christmas Carol, a novella that would not only revive the spirit of Christmas, but would become the heart of Victorian celebrations. Scrooge, the miserly figure whose heart is warmed by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, was a stark representation of the era's complex relationship with wealth, generosity, and social responsibility. Dickens used his narrative to speak directly to the societal ills of his time: poverty, inequality, and the lack of compassion for those less fortunate. But the magic of A Christmas Carol was not just in its critique of society, it was in its reimagination of the holiday. Gone were the days of a simple feast, a one-day event marked by charity and restraint. Instead, Christmas became a celebration of love, family, and community. It became a time to reflect on the deeper meanings of life, to embrace forgiveness, to gather with loved ones, and to extend kindness to strangers. Through Dickens' work, Christmas was no longer a distant holiday, but a central event, drawing people together in a way that had never been seen before. While Dickens' influence was far-reaching, he was not the only force behind the Victorian reinvention of Christmas. The Victorians themselves, with their fascination for nostalgia, tradition, and pageantry, began to reshape the holiday into the celebration we recognize today. Christmas trees, a tradition brought over from Germany, were embraced by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who made them fashionable across the British Empire. The trees, decorated with candles, ornaments, and sweets, became a symbol of warmth and family, an emblem of the season's joy. The practice of sending Christmas cards, introduced by Sir Henry Cole in 1843, further cemented the idea of spreading goodwill and festive cheer. The Christmas card was not just a way to exchange greetings, but a way to share the holiday spirit, literally, across distances, keeping families connected and reminding them of their ties. These cards, with their bright colors, images of snow-covered landscapes, and depictions of Christmas trees, reinforced the vision of a cozy, warm, and welcoming holiday. Each card sent was a small declaration of kindness, a piece of the holiday's new identity that stretched beyond the home and into the streets of London, Manchester, and beyond. But perhaps the most significant transformation of all was the creation of a new figure to embody the spirit of the season. Santa Claus, who had existed in various forms for centuries, was now being reinvented to match the ideals of the Victorian age. Drawing from Dutch traditions of Sinterklaas and other European gift-bringers, the figure of Santa was brought to life in new ways by artists like Thomas Nast, who first illustrated him in the late 19th century as the jolly, rotund, and bearded man we recognize today. Santa Claus was more than just a gift giver, he was a symbol of generosity, goodwill, and family. He was the personification of the Christmas spirit, the embodiment of warmth, love, and joy. Santa's workshop at the North Pole, a magical place where toys were made for good children, reflected the Victorians' own love for industriousness and innovation. But unlike the cold, business-driven world outside, Santa's world was one of fantasy and warmth, a place where the troubles of the outside world could be forgotten for a while, and all that mattered was the joy of giving. As the years passed, Christmas became an increasingly elaborate affair, with grand feasts, festive decorations, and presents galore. Yet, amidst the joy, there was an undercurrent of something deeper, something that harkened back to the old traditions of charity, kindness, and community. The Victorian reinvention of Christmas was not just about making the holiday more joyful, it was about making it more meaningful. It was about reconnecting with the things that mattered most: family, generosity, and compassion. It was a time when people gathered around the hearth to sing carols, when families spent hours together, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. The home became a sacred space, a place of warmth and love, where the chaos of the outside world could be momentarily forgotten. This was the Christmas that the Victorians envisioned, a holiday that was about connection, not just consumption. In many ways, this transformation of Christmas was not just a reflection of the era's changing values, but a response to the industrialization that was rapidly transforming society. As the world became more modern, more driven by progress and productivity, the need for a holiday that emphasized emotional connection, human warmth, and generosity became even more pressing. Christmas, in the Victorian imagination, was a way to hold on to something precious in a rapidly changing world, a way to remind people that amidst the factories and the machines, the most important things in life were still the simplest: love, family, kindness, and the warmth of human connection. So, as the Victorian reinvention of Christmas took hold, it became much more than a mere holiday. It became a symbol of what people could be when they embraced their better selves. It was a time to leave behind the coldness of the world and embrace the warmth of the season, to reach out to others and offer a gift, a word of kindness, or a simple gesture of goodwill. This Victorian vision of Christmas, a holiday full of love, generosity, and magic, continues to shape the way we celebrate today. And though the world has changed since Dickens first penned his words, the spirit of his message remains the same, that Christmas is a time for renewal, for family, and for the kind of kindness that can warm even the coldest winter night. It was winter, and the streets of the bustling city were adorned with the warmth of holiday cheer. Snowflakes drifted down like whispered secrets, settling on rooftops, trees, and the cobbled streets below. The world seemed to have slowed, caught in a delicate pause before the coming celebrations. But amid the joyful hum of Christmas lights and the scent of roasted chestnuts in the air, there was something else, a powerful marketing campaign that would forever change the way we saw Santa Claus. It was in the cozy, glowing corners of the American landscape, fueled by a single brand, that the modern image of Santa Claus would take form, a chubby, jolly man in a bright red suit, carrying gifts for all. His image, once grounded in European traditions, was now made iconic by a bottle of cola. The story begins with the Coca-Cola Company in the 1930s, a time when the world was still reeling from the Great Depression. In an era where optimism was in short supply, Coca-Cola sought to bring a message of warmth, cheer, and community to a world in need. The holiday season was the perfect opportunity to reach people on an emotional level, to remind them of joy, of sharing, and of togetherness. And so, Coca-Cola launched a series of Christmas advertisements featuring a figure who would soon become synonymous with the holiday itself, Santa Claus. Before the Coca-Cola ads, Santa was already a well-established figure, but his appearance varied greatly. He could be tall and thin, or short and stout, sometimes wearing green, blue, or brown. The image of Santa was still fluid, not fully cemented in the popular imagination. But Coca-Cola's decision to depict Santa as a plump, cheerful man in a bright red suit marked a turning point, creating an image that would be imprinted in the hearts and minds of people worldwide for generations to come. In 1931, Coca-Cola turned to artist Haddon Sundblom, who had already built a reputation for creating captivating, warm images of everyday life. Sundblom's task was to create a Santa that embodied the essence of joy, warmth, and community. His Santa Claus was not the stern, magical figure that had once been depicted in stories. Instead, he was a playful, gentle man, with a round belly, a white beard, and eyes full of mirth. In the iconic advertisements that Sundblom created, Santa was often seen enjoying a Coke, surrounded by the comforting glow of the holiday season. The images were rich with emotion, familiar, homey, and utterly heartwarming. What made these advertisements so powerful wasn't just the image of Santa, but the way in which it tapped into the collective spirit of the holiday. Santa, in his red suit, became a figure of comfort and joy, embodying the warmth of family gatherings and the simple pleasures of life. Coca-Cola's Santa wasn't just about selling soda, he was about selling an ideal, an image of a world where everything was perfect, warm, and inviting. The advertisements drew people in not with the promise of a product, but with the promise of a better, kinder world during the holidays. And in that world, Coca-Cola's Santa was a central figure, an emblem of happiness, generosity, and the joy of togetherness. Sundblom's Santa became a cornerstone of Coca-Cola's holiday campaigns, appearing in print ads, calendars, and even store displays. His bright red suit, his friendly smile, and his hearty laugh were all designed to evoke feelings of warmth, nostalgia, and hope. The image of Santa drinking a Coke, his eyes twinkling with mischief, was more than just a marketing tool. It was an invitation to participate in the holiday spirit, to embrace the happiness and warmth that Coca-Cola was selling, and it worked. By the time World War II ended, the image of Santa Claus as we know him today was fully cemented in the American imagination, largely due to Coca-Cola's influence. Santa was no longer just a myth, a figure from old European folklore. He had become a universally recognized symbol of the holiday season, his bright red suit a hallmark of the joy and warmth that Christmas promised. Coca-Cola's marketing campaign had succeeded not just in selling a product, but in creating an enduring cultural icon, a figure whose image would transcend generations and remain a central part of the Christmas season for years to come. But it wasn't just the American public who embraced this new vision of Santa. Coca-Cola's advertisements spread across the globe, bringing their version of Santa to every corner of the world. In every country where Coca-Cola was sold, the jolly man in the red suit became synonymous with the holidays, an international symbol of cheer, giving, and togetherness. As the world became more interconnected, the image of Santa was no longer confined to a particular culture or tradition. It was shared, celebrated, and loved by all. Coca-Cola's red-suited Santa had become a cultural phenomenon, and yet, as much as he was an embodiment of Christmas cheer, his legacy is also a reminder of the power of branding and advertising to shape cultural norms. The world had embraced this image of Santa Claus, not because it was the only one available, but because it resonated deeply with what people wanted to believe about the holiday season. Coca-Cola's Santa was not just a figure of commercialism, but a figure of joy, of connection, and of the warmth of home. Through the simple act of choosing the right colors, the right expressions, and the right moment, Coca-Cola's Santa became the embodiment of everything people wanted Christmas to be. As the decades passed, the red-suited Santa continued to appear in Coca-Cola ads year after year, a constant presence in the holiday season. He was no longer just the product of a marketing campaign, he was the very spirit of Christmas itself, as familiar as the twinkling lights on the tree, the sound of carolers singing, and the joy of being surrounded by loved ones. The red suit, the snowy backdrop, and the cheerful smile had become as much a part of Christmas as the gifts under the tree. Coca-Cola's Santa had done more than just sell soda. He had helped define the modern image of Christmas, shaping not just how people celebrated, but how they felt about the season. And as the years went by, the figure of Santa in his red suit continued to remind people of what mattered most: love, warmth, family, and the joy of sharing moments together. The malls were buzzing with energy, a holiday frenzy that seemed to blanket everything in a haze of red and green. Children pulled at their parents' hands, their faces lit with excitement, eager for the moment when they would finally sit on Santa's lap. The air was thick with the scent of cinnamon, chocolate, and evergreens. Yet, as the line to see Santa grew longer, so did the anticipation. For many, this would be the moment where their Christmas dreams would come alive, their wishes whispered to a jolly old man who would make everything better. But behind the festive facade, there was a darker undertone, one that lurked in the shadows of those familiar malls and the men in red suits. Mall Santas, the beloved figures that stand as icons of the season, are not the simple, magical beings they appear to be. These modern-day Saint Nics, who appear in shopping centers across the country, embody the spirit of generosity and joy. Yet, beneath the laughter and festive cheer, the role of the mall Santa has become something of a complex, often unsettling symbol. The stories and rumors that swirl around them have added a layer of urban legend to the festive season, a hidden narrative of strangeness and tension that some whisper about but few speak of aloud. It starts with the strangers behind the beards, the men and women who take on the role of Santa Claus each year. For many, it is a cherished tradition, a way to spread joy, to help children believe in magic. For others, it can feel like a strange, surreal experience. Donning the costume is an instant transformation. The man behind the beard is no longer an individual, but a symbol, an archetype. Yet the act of slipping into that red suit, especially for those who wear it year after year, can create an unsettling duality. Who are they beneath the costume? Are they the same person when they leave the chair and step out of the mall? There's a silent discomfort in the eyes of some, both children and adults, as they approach, unsure if this Santa is the real deal or just another stranger in a holiday disguise. Urban legends about mall Santas have taken root over the years, their stories whispered in hushed tones, passed along like gifts of fright. Some say that 1 in every 1,000 mall Santas isn't the kindly grandparent-like figure they appear to be, but someone with far more sinister intentions. It's said that some Santas, those who sit at the heart of every shopping mall during the holiday season, have dark histories, rumors of criminal records, or lives lived on the edge of society. The Santa costume, some say, offers them a shield, a mask to hide behind, allowing them to move unnoticed in the crowd, sheltered by the trust placed in their role. It's not just the men in the suits that fuel these urban legends, but the strange occurrences that sometimes accompany the Santa experience. Children are often told to believe in Santa, that he will come down the chimney to deliver gifts. But what happens when the children stop believing, or worse, when they tell tales of things they've seen or heard while sitting on Santa's lap? Some whisper that the mall Santa, ever in tune with the wishes of children, might whisper back something strange, something that has no place in the holiday cheer. There are stories, half believed and half forgotten, of children who claimed that Santa spoke in odd, cryptic phrases or asked unsettling questions when they confided their Christmas wishes. A legend begins to form, the mall Santa who isn't just there to listen to wishes, but to leave a subtle imprint on the child, perhaps even in ways they don't understand until years later. And then there are the stories that seem to cross the boundary between legend and reality. A child might sit on Santa's lap and tell him their greatest wish, only to have that wish come true in a way that feels too uncanny to be a mere coincidence. It's the legend of the Santa who knows far too much. A child's wish, a lost toy, a broken home, echoes through the years, only for the child to return years later, a teenager or adult, to find that the mall Santa was eerily aware of their life, their personal struggles, their hopes and fears. Did Santa know all along? Or was there something more to the man behind the beard than anyone had ever realized? In one particularly strange urban legend, it's said that there exists a Santa who arrives at the mall long before the crowds gather, before the decorations are hung and the music begins. This Santa, they say, is different. He isn't hired by the mall, but appears on his own accord. No one knows where he comes from, only that his presence is unsettling. He sits silently in his chair, his red suit almost too bright, too pristine for someone who has been up all night delivering presents. And when the children come, he smiles, but there is something hollow in that smile, something deeply sad. The air around him grows cold, and those who've seen him say that his eyes are empty, as if looking into a void. This legend, shared in whispers, tells of the Santa who isn't just part of the holiday cheer. He's a harbinger of something darker, something that brings with it an unsettling chill, a reminder that Christmas is not always a time of joy. Yet, for all the tales and legends, the mall Santa remains a fixture of the holiday season, a bridge between the innocence of childhood and the complex, often ambiguous world of adulthood. For the children, he is a symbol of wonder, a reflection of their hopes and dreams. For the adults, he is both a reminder of what they once believed and a symbol of the commercialization of Christmas, a holiday co-opted by the marketplace. He is the embodiment of a time when magic was real, but also a figure whose presence feels oddly out of place in an increasingly cynical world. Each year, as the holiday season approaches and the malls start decking their halls, the mall Santa prepares to take his place in the center of the whirlwind of consumerism, the glowing beacon of Christmas joy in a world that often seems to have lost its sense of wonder. But no matter how many legends are born or how many strange occurrences go unspoken, one thing remains certain: the mall Santa will always be there, sitting in his chair, waiting for the next child to climb into his lap, to whisper their wishes, and to believe in the magic of Christmas, at least for a moment. It was the winter of 1942, and the world was caught in the midst of one of the deadliest conflicts in history. Soldiers were scattered across distant lands, far from their families, while the home front was alive with a kind of quiet desperation. The war loomed over everything, and the holiday season, usually a time for family and celebration, felt like a cruel reminder of what had been lost. Yet in the midst of the turmoil, there was something that remained unchanged, something that continued to offer a sense of hope, even if it was only for a moment. It was the image of Santa Claus, that jolly figure of goodwill, now transformed into a symbol of resilience, patriotism, and strength in the face of adversity. During wartime, the figure of Santa Claus became something far more than just the bearer of gifts. As the world plunged deeper into the horrors of war, the government, military, and media seized upon Santa's image to create a sense of unity, to rally citizens to the cause, and to keep spirits high in the face of unimaginable hardships. Santa, who had always been a symbol of generosity, now became a symbol of determination, of fighting for what was right, and of hope in the darkest of times. The most striking example of this transformation was seen in the American wartime propaganda campaigns. Santa, once associated with the leisurely indulgence of the holiday season, was now thrust into the battlefield of public opinion. Posters, advertisements, and pamphlets began to appear across the country, featuring Santa not just as a benevolent gift giver, but as a figure actively participating in the war effort. In some posters, Santa was depicted as an enlisted soldier, wearing military gear, clutching a rifle or standing proudly in front of a warplane. His familiar red suit was now adorned with a military insignia, a badge of honor signaling his commitment to the war. One of the most powerful examples of Santa's wartime transformation was the iconic image of him on a World War II poster, which urged citizens to buy war bonds in support of the military. The image showed Santa, not perched in his sleigh with a sack of toys, but holding a bond and smiling broadly. The message was clear: Santa was not just about bringing joy, he was about supporting the country, helping to fund the war effort, and ensuring that the troops would have what they needed to fight for victory. The campaign aimed to tap into the emotional power of Santa, a figure already beloved by all, to encourage the American public to contribute to the war in a tangible way. But it wasn't just in America where Santa took on a new role. The same sense of propaganda was evident in the UK, where Santa was used to bolster morale during the darkest days of World War II. In Britain, posters featuring Santa urging civilians to keep calm and carry on, or to conserve resources for the war effort, appeared frequently. Santa, once seen as a symbol of excess and indulgence, was now reimagined as a symbol of rationing, of the sacrifices that needed to be made for the greater good. Santa's wartime incarnation wasn't just about encouraging people to support the military, it was also about keeping hope alive for the troops. Soldiers, many of whom were facing months of combat in foreign lands, looked to Santa as a reminder of what they were fighting for. Letters to the front lines were often accompanied by images of Santa, reminding soldiers of home, of the joy that awaited them when the war was over. In many ways, Santa became a beacon of resilience for the men and women who fought, a constant reminder that despite the darkness of war, there was still something worth fighting for, something good, something pure, something that represented the best of humanity. Perhaps the most poignant image of Santa during wartime came in the form of morale-boosting Christmas cards sent from soldiers to their families back home. In these cards, Santa was often shown alongside the troops, his comforting, familiar face offering solace in the face of great uncertainty. These cards, which soldiers carried with them to the front lines, were a way for them to send a message of love and hope to their families, to remind them that even though they were far from home, the spirit of Christmas and the strength of their nation remained unbroken. Santa's wartime role also extended beyond the soldiers and into the homes of civilians. As resources grew scarce, as food and goods were rationed, Santa became a symbol of not just generosity, but also sacrifice. Families were asked to conserve what they had, to forego the luxuries of previous years in order to support the war effort. In these moments, the figure of Santa reminded the people at home of the importance of their sacrifices, of how every small act of support was vital to the cause. Santa, with his message of hope and joy, now served as a reminder of the greater purpose behind these sacrifices, the preservation of peace, freedom, and security for generations to come. But as powerful as Santa's role was in the propaganda campaigns, there was a subtle shift in his image, a shift that was not entirely about war or patriotism, but about the resilience of the human spirit. In the posters and advertisements that featured him, Santa's eyes often held a sense of quiet determination, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was still room for joy, for laughter, for love. Santa's role as a wartime icon was about more than just selling bonds or encouraging donations. It was about inspiring people to hold on to the things that made life worth living: family, love, and hope. As the war drew to a close, Santa's image continued to endure. The world had been forever changed by the events of the past few years, but in the aftermath, the message that Santa had conveyed, of hope, resilience, and the promise of better days ahead, remained just as powerful as ever. In the years that followed, Santa returned to his familiar role as the jolly, gift-giving figure of holiday cheer, but the memory of his wartime transformation lingered. He had been more than just a symbol of Christmas, he had been a symbol of perseverance, of standing strong in the face of adversity. And so, as the holiday season continues to roll around each year, we are reminded that Santa Claus is not just a figure of magic and wonder, but a symbol of the strength, hope, and resilience of the human spirit, even in the most trying of times. The Santa who fought alongside soldiers, who urged civilians to contribute to the war effort, who offered comfort and joy during the darkest days, is the same Santa who continues to bring light to our lives every year. And in that sense, his role in wartime propaganda was not just a chapter in history, it was a testament to the enduring power of hope, the power of Santa Claus himself. The world was shifting, reshaped by wars, revolutions, and the creeping shadow of technology, yet amidst this whirlwind of change, one figure seemed to rise above it all: Santa Claus. His laugh echoed from radios, his image blazed across billboards, and his jolly, rotund figure was immortalized in movies, cartoons, and comics. What had once been a humble folk figure tied to the whispers of tradition now stood as a global phenomenon, a star of pop culture. Santa's ascension into the realm of pop culture began subtly. The 19th century poems and paintings had laid the groundwork, sketching out a figure who was both enchanting and relatable. But it wasn't until the golden age of advertising that Santa truly found his stride. Companies sought to tether their products to the holiday spirit, and who better to sell joy and magic than Santa himself? His red suit, now synonymous with Coca-Cola's branding, became a symbol of abundance and festivity, saturating every corner of the market. Yet this wasn't merely commerce, it was the birth of a character who would outgrow even the boldest marketing campaigns. In the early days of film, Santa made his cinematic debut in short silent reels. These portrayals were quaint and rudimentary, but they planted the seeds of a Santa who could exist on screen, larger than life. By the 1940s, Hollywood had embraced him fully. Miracle on 34th Street painted him not as a caricature but as a figure of warmth and wisdom, standing resolute against the cynicism of the modern world. It was this portrayal, a Santa who was human yet magical, flawed yet kind, that resonated with audiences and cemented his place in the cultural imagination. As televisions entered living rooms, Santa found another stage to conquer. Animated specials became annual traditions, none more iconic than Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or How the Grinch Stole Christmas. These weren't just stories for children, they carried deeper messages of acceptance, generosity, and hope, using Santa as a moral anchor. He wasn't just a character, he was a vessel for the ideals of the holiday season, refracted through the lens of modern media. And then came music. Santa wasn't just in pictures and stories anymore, he was in every melody that defined December. Songs like Santa Claus is Coming to Town turned him into an omnipotent figure, watching, judging, rewarding. These weren't just tunes, they were cultural touchstones, immortalizing Santa as both a symbol of joy and a playful enforcer of morality. Yet the rise of Santa in pop culture wasn't always heartwarming. As his image was copied, adapted, and parroted, he began to splinter into multiple identities. The 1980s and 1990s saw the emergence of darker, subversive interpretations of Santa. In some movies, he became a symbol of excess, greed, or even chaos. Films like Bad Santa flipped his wholesome persona on its head, while horror stories transformed him into a figure of fear. These weren't just gimmicks, they were reflections of a society grappling with its own disillusionment, using Santa as a mirror to explore its complexities. At the same time, Santa was becoming increasingly globalized, adapted, and reimagined by cultures worldwide. Japanese commercials reinterpreted him with a quirky, almost surreal flair. In Brazil, he became Papai Noel, a sun-kissed figure of summer. In some African countries, he donned local attire, blending into the vibrant traditions of the region. Each culture took Santa and made him their own, weaving him into the fabric of their holidays, adding new dimensions to his mythos. Santa's rise in pop culture was not just about visibility, it was about evolution. He wasn't static. He morphed with the times, reflecting the values, fears, and dreams of each generation. For some, he was a symbol of nostalgia, a link to childhood wonder. For others, he was a critique of consumerism, a reminder of how the magic of Christmas could be overshadowed by the machinery of capitalism. But through it all, he endured, becoming not just a figure of folklore, but a cultural icon capable of embodying whatever story the world needed to tell. Even as digital technology reshaped the entertainment landscape, Santa adapted yet again. Animated GIFs of him filled social media feeds. Virtual Santas appeared in video games, granting quests and rewards. AI chatbots mimicked his tone, letting children talk to Santa online. In this era of pixels and screens, Santa was no less magical. If anything, his ability to remain relevant in a world of constant change solidified his place as a cultural cornerstone. The rise of Santa in pop culture wasn't simply a linear ascent, it was a kaleidoscope of identities and interpretations, each adding a new layer to his legend. From the silver screen to smartphones, from heartfelt stories to biting satires, Santa became more than a figure of tradition. He became a reflection of humanity itself, its joys, its contradictions, its yearning for something larger than life. And through every twist and turn, he remained there, a constant presence amidst the shifting sands of culture, his laughter echoing through the ages, carrying with it the promise of hope, wonder, and a little bit of magic. In the cold, moonlit woods where shadows twisted and danced, the stories whispered of creatures small and silent, watching from the cover of snow-draped evergreens. These weren't the cheerful, toy-making elves of modern lore, but something older, stranger, beings with origins shrouded in ancient traditions and mysteries that defied easy understanding. They were the hidden folk, elusive spirits said to dwell at the edges of human consciousness, influencing the world in ways unseen. Long before the elves became a charming addition to Santa's mythos, they were feared and revered as powerful entities. The ancient Norse spoke of the Alfar, beings of extraordinary beauty and wisdom who resided in Alfheim, a realm parallel to the human world. They were not mere helpers but guardians of the natural order, wielding powers that could heal or harm. Farmers would leave offerings at the edge of their fields, hoping to curry favor with these enigmatic spirits. To disrespect them was to court disaster, crops failing, livestock sickening, or a family struck by unexplained misfortune. In Iceland, the Huldufolk, or hidden people, occupy a central place in folklore. These elusive beings are said to live in rocks and hills, blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. They are invisible to most, but are believed to be keen observers of human behavior, intervening when their sacred spaces are disturbed. Roads in Iceland have been rerouted to avoid disturbing rocks said to house the Huldufolk, a testament to the lingering belief in their presence. They were neither wholly good nor entirely malevolent, but capricious, their actions shaped by how they were treated. How, then, did these mysterious beings come to be linked with the cheerful, industrious helpers of Santa Claus? The transformation is as strange as it is fascinating. During the 19th century, as Christmas traditions were reshaped in Europe and America, the image of Santa Claus was steadily refined into the kindly, jolly figure we recognize today. Alongside him came the elves, who were distilled into playful, childlike figures that reflected the Victorian fascination with fairies and diminutive magical beings. Yet, beneath this sanitized depiction lingered echoes of their wilder origins. The elves of modern Santa lore are often depicted as tireless craftsmen, their nimble fingers fashioning toys in a hidden workshop at the North Pole. But the very act of retreating to a remote, snowy landscape carries the faintest trace of their ancient identity. The North Pole itself, desolate and unreachable, mirrors the liminal spaces the hidden folk were said to inhabit, places just beyond the grasp of human comprehension. Even their ability to create, to transform raw materials into something wondrous, harks back to the legendary Alfar, who were thought to possess unparalleled skills in crafting magical objects. Yet, for all their cheer, the elves have always carried a shadow of unease. In some stories, their laughter seems too knowing, their eyes too keen. They are helpers, yes, but their tireless work hides a deeper mystery. How do they live unseen? What fuels their endless energy? The silence surrounding these questions seems deliberate, as if humanity has chosen to forget the darker truths of their origin. There are places in the world, even now, where the elves of Christmas and the hidden folk of folklore seem to merge. In Scandinavian traditions, the Tomte or Nis, a small, gnome-like being, appears around Christmas time. These household spirits are fiercely protective but demand respect. Families leave bowls of porridge as offerings, and woe betide anyone who neglects this tradition. In these figures, we see the lingering memory of the hidden folk, their quiet power masked by a veneer of domesticity. The connection between Santa and his elves is a curious one. Did he tame them, bending their wildness to his will? Or are they the ones who granted him his magic, ensuring his ability to traverse the globe in a single night? The stories offer no clear answers, leaving a tantalizing gap for the imagination to fill. Perhaps the elves allow us to glimpse a world that existed long before Christmas was wrapped in ribbons and lights, a world where the hidden folk watched and waited, shaping our fates with invisible hands. And still, there are those who believe. Not in the cheerful toymakers of the North Pole, but in the hidden folk who walk unseen among us, whose laughter lingers on the wind and whose presence is felt in the shiver of a cold winter's night. The stories may have changed, softened, but their essence remains, a reminder that not all magic can be tamed, and not all mysteries need solving. As the snow falls and the night grows quiet, one can't help but wonder, are they watching still? The night is silent, the world wrapped in a blanket of snow, when the faint sound of bells begins to echo through the air. It's a sound that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once, accompanied by the rhythmic pounding of hooves. And then, as if summoned by the very breath of winter, a sleigh appears, pulled not by ordinary beasts, but by creatures shrouded in myth, reindeer. Their breath crystallizes in the icy air, and their antlers glisten under the pale light of the moon. This is no ordinary sleigh ride. This is magic in motion, a symbol of boundless wonder tied inexorably to the legend of Santa Claus. The reindeer, often depicted as gentle and noble, are far from mere animals in this tale. Their ability to fly, a feat that defies nature, raises questions that reach into the realm of myth and ancient beliefs. The idea of magical animals soaring through the skies is not new. It is rooted in traditions far older than Christmas itself. In Norse mythology, the god Odin rode an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, a creature capable of crossing vast distances and even traversing realms. Sleipnir's supernatural speed and agility made him a fitting companion to the All-Father, and echoes of this legendary steed can be found in the stories of Santa's airborne companions. But why reindeer? The answer lies in the cold, unforgiving north, where reindeer have long been revered as symbols of survival and strength. Among the Sami people of Scandinavia, reindeer are more than just animals, they are lifelines. They provide food, clothing, and transportation, and their presence in folklore reflects their deep connection to human life in the Arctic. The reindeer's association with the holiday season likely stems from this bond, combined with the ancient Yule traditions that celebrated the winter solstice, a time when the veil between the mortal world and the magical seemed thinnest. The sleigh itself, drawn by these extraordinary creatures, carries its own mystique. Sleighs have always been vehicles of wonder, their ability to glide effortlessly over snow lending them an almost ethereal quality. In Santa's mythos, the sleigh becomes more than just a mode of transportation. It is a vessel of dreams, capable of carrying unimaginable quantities of gifts and traveling the globe in a single night. This defies not only the laws of physics but the limits of human imagination, reinforcing the idea that Santa operates in a realm beyond our understanding. The reindeer, though noble and magical, are not nameless. They have identities that have been etched into the fabric of popular culture: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen. Their names, immortalized in Clement Clarke Moore's poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, add personality and charm to these creatures of myth. Each name conjures an image: Dancer, leaping gracefully through the air; Blitzen, a bolt of lightning streaking across the sky. And then, of course, there is Rudolph, the most famous of them all. His glowing red nose, often seen as a symbol of difference and resilience, is a modern addition to the legend, but one that resonates deeply with the story's core themes of magic and acceptance. The mechanics of their flight, how they lift the sleigh into the air and navigate the world in mere hours, are never explained, and perhaps that's the point. Magic, after all, loses some of its wonder when dissected. The lack of explanation leaves room for the imagination to roam, for children to envision the reindeer soaring above their rooftops, their hooves never touching the ground, their bells jingling softly in the night. Yet, the reindeer are not merely passive participants in the story. In some traditions, they possess an intelligence and awareness that set them apart from ordinary animals. They are depicted as knowing their task, as understanding the importance of their journey. They are not just Santa's companions, they are his partners in the great undertaking of Christmas Eve. Without them, the magic would falter, the sleigh grounded, the gifts undelivered. Their strength, speed, and loyalty are what make the impossible possible. There is also something profoundly symbolic about the image of a sleigh pulled by reindeer. It speaks to a harmony with nature, a connection to the wild that modern life often overlooks. The reindeer are creatures of the earth, yet in this story, they transcend it, bridging the gap between the mundane and the miraculous. They remind us that magic doesn't always come from distant stars or hidden realms. Sometimes, it is born from the natural world, elevated by belief and imagination. As the sleigh streaks across the sky, it leaves no trail, no proof of its passage, only the fleeting sense of wonder it inspires. And when the night is over, when the gifts are delivered and the reindeer vanish into the snow, they leave behind a lingering question: where do they go? Do they retreat to some hidden sanctuary at the top of the world, where the cold winds sing of ancient secrets? Or do they exist only in the fleeting moments of Christmas Eve, called into being by the collective dreams of those who still believe? The reindeer and the sleigh are more than just vehicles of Santa's story, they are the embodiment of the magic that defines the season. They remind us of the power of belief, of the joy found in the impossible, and of the beauty of a world where, if only for one night, the ordinary rules no longer apply. And as the snow settles and the stars fade, the sound of bells lingers in the air, a haunting, hopeful echo of the magic that carries Santa Claus through the night. In the farthest reaches of the Arctic, where the sun vanishes for months and the icy winds howl like ancient spirits, a story persists, of a place hidden from human eyes, where magic reigns supreme and the impossible becomes routine. Santa's workshop at the North Pole is more than a charming fantasy, it is a modern echo of older myths, steeped in the allure of mysterious lands and the primal draw of the unknown. It is a tale spun from ancient whispers, woven together with the threads of imagination and wonder, and cloaked in the eternal frost of the Arctic. The North Pole itself is a curious choice, a place of extremes where survival seems impossible, let alone industry or magic. Yet, this barren, icy landscape perfectly mirrors the otherworldly nature of Santa's domain. For centuries, the Arctic has symbolized the edge of the known world, a threshold between what is real and what lies beyond. Ancient seafarers feared it, believing it to be home to monstrous creatures and treacherous seas. Even as explorers ventured closer, the pole remained elusive, a blank spot on the map shrouded in both danger and mystique. Legends of hidden lands in the Arctic predate Santa's workshop by centuries. Norse mythology speaks of Jotunheim, a realm of frost giants, and Niflheim, the land of ice and fog, both cold and inhospitable yet imbued with raw, untamed power. Inuit lore tells of spirits dwelling beneath the ice, their presence felt in the shifting winds and the creak of glaciers. These tales, passed down through generations, suggest that the Arctic has long been a place where the boundaries between the natural and supernatural blur. When the modern image of Santa Claus began to take shape, the North Pole became an irresistible setting. It was remote, unreachable, and untainted by human hands, a perfect location for a workshop that operates on pure magic. But the workshop itself, as imagined today, carries echoes of older myths about hidden, enchanted places. It is a realm of endless creativity, where time bends and space expands to accommodate an infinite array of toys and wonders. It is, in many ways, a reflection of the human longing for a sanctuary untouched by the harsh realities of the world. The idea of a hidden workshop isn't unique to Santa. Similar myths exist across cultures, often tied to the notion of a secret place where the extraordinary is crafted. In Norse mythology, the dwarves of Svartalfheim were master smiths, creating magical weapons and treasures in their underground forges. In Celtic lore, the City, the fairies, lived in hidden mounds where they created objects of great beauty and power. These stories share a common thread, the belief in a hidden, magical realm where creation flourishes beyond the constraints of the ordinary. But Santa's workshop isn't just a place of creation, it's a place of wonder. The image of elves bustling about, crafting toys with nimble fingers, adds a sense of life and joy to the cold Arctic landscape. Yet there's something curious about these elves. They seem cheerful, industrious, and tireless, but their origins are as mysterious as the workshop itself. Are they descendants of the hidden folk, bound to this icy domain by ancient magic? Or are they manifestations of the North Pole's enchantment, born of the same forces that allow the workshop to exist? The Arctic itself lends an air of authenticity to the myth. Its harsh, unyielding environment keeps humans at bay, preserving the illusion that something extraordinary could lie just beyond the horizon. Even modern science, with its satellites and explorers, hasn't completely pierced the Arctic's veil of mystery. The shifting ice and the ever-changing landscape make it a place that resists full understanding, a perfect setting for a legend that thrives on the unknown. And then there's the magic. How does this hidden workshop function in a place where the sun disappears for half the year and temperatures plummet to unimaginable lows? The question itself is part of the allure. The workshop doesn't need to adhere to the rules of the natural world. Its existence is proof that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Its warmth defies the cold, its light pierces the endless night, and its joy transcends the isolation of its location. Yet, there's a quiet unease beneath the charm of the workshop. If it exists beyond human reach, what else might dwell in the Arctic's hidden corners? The same legends that celebrate Santa's magical domain also hint at darker forces lurking in the icy expanse. Some say the North Pole is a portal, a gateway to realms unknown. The Inuit speak of the Kalapalik, beings that dwell under the ice, their eerie hums luring the unwary to their doom. Even modern myths, like those of lost expeditions and ships swallowed by the ice, add to the Arctic's reputation as a place of both wonder and dread. The North Pole is not merely a setting for Santa's workshop, it is a character in its own right, a place alive with secrets and stories. Its vastness and emptiness make it a canvas for imagination, its icy silence a backdrop for the extraordinary. As long as the Arctic remains a place of mystery, the legend of Santa's workshop will endure, its magic as boundless as the snowfields that stretch to the horizon. And as the world sleeps on Christmas Eve, children dreaming of gifts and laughter, somewhere in the Arctic night, the workshop hums with life. Its existence is felt more than seen, a presence that lingers in the collective consciousness. The winds carry whispers of its magic, and the stars above seem to twinkle just a little brighter, as if they too are keeping a secret that no map or explorer will ever uncover. The clock strikes midnight, and the world falls into the quiet of deep night. Snow blankets rooftops and streets, and the stars glisten coldly above. Somewhere, unseen and unbound by the rules of time, a figure moves, a flash of red, a whisper of bells, and the impossible begins. Santa Claus defies everything we know of time and mortality, operating in a realm that bends the laws of nature. How else could he visit millions of homes in a single night? How else could he exist, unaging, for centuries? The answer lies not in mere fantasy but in the profound and haunting myths that echo through history. The idea of immortality is as old as humanity itself, whispered in the tales of gods, heroes, and those who dared to challenge the natural order. Santa Claus, with his perpetual cheer and ageless face, embodies this ancient longing. He has persisted through wars, plagues, and revolutions, his image untouched by the ravages of time. Yet, beneath the warmth of his story lies the unsettling question, what price does such eternal life demand? Immortality, after all, is rarely gifted without cost. Legends across cultures tell of beings who have mastered time or escaped its grasp entirely. The Norse gods, though mighty, feared the day of Ragnarok when their end would come. But they also possessed Yggdrasil, the world tree, whose roots touched the well of Urd, a place where time flowed differently. In Greek mythology, Kronos, the titan of time, devoured his own children to maintain power, a grim reminder that mastery over time is often tied to sacrifice and suffering. Santa's apparent command over time is no less mysterious. To deliver gifts to every child in a single night would require more than just speed, it would demand the suspension of time itself. Some suggest that Santa exists outside the linear progression of time, stepping into a frozen moment where hours stretch into infinity. Others envision him wielding a form of magic older than language, rooted in the very fabric of existence. But where does this power come from? Is it an innate gift, or did he acquire it through means unknown? Some whisper of ancient pacts, of alliances with forces that dwell in the shadows of our myths. Could the roots of Santa's time manipulation be found in folklore tied to figures like Odin, the one-eyed wanderer who sought wisdom at any cost? Odin, after all, was said to traverse vast realms in an instant, and his connection to Yule traditions cannot be ignored. Perhaps Santa carries a fragment of that primal power, a spark of the divine that allows him to transcend the mortal plane. Immortality, too, is a double-edged sword. While it grants freedom from the decay of the flesh, it carries the weight of eternity. To watch the world change, to see generations rise and fall, to remain constant while everything else fades, this is not a gift lightly borne. What does Santa feel as he gazes upon the endless passage of time? Does he mourn the children who once believed in him, now long gone? Or has he become something beyond emotion, a figure shaped entirely by his purpose? Even the mechanics of his immortality remain shrouded in mystery. Some say he drinks from the fountain of youth, hidden in the icy depths of the North Pole, its waters guarded by unseen forces. Others speak of a magical object, perhaps a relic of ancient times, that sustains his life force. Still others suggest that belief itself fuels his existence, that as long as children believe in him, he cannot fade. If the latter is true, it raises a chilling possibility. What happens if that belief falters? Does he weaken, his immortality slipping away with each passing year? Or does he linger, trapped in a liminal state, unable to fully live or die? The manipulation of time and the defiance of mortality are not without their dangers. To exist beyond the flow of time is to risk becoming untethered from reality itself. The ancient Greeks spoke of Kairos, the god of opportune moments, whose fleeting presence could alter destiny. To wield such power recklessly could unravel the delicate balance of the universe. Does Santa tread this line carefully, or has he mastered it so thoroughly that the risks no longer matter? And yet, for all its mysteries, there is something comforting in the idea of Santa's timelessness. He is a constant in an ever-changing world, a symbol of hope and joy that endures through the darkest winters. But that comfort comes at a cost, for his immortality and control over time remind us of our own limitations. We age, we move forward, unable to pause or rewind. Santa, in his eternal state, becomes a mirror of what we cannot have, a life unbound by the ticking clock. As the night stretches on and the world sleeps, Santa moves through the frozen hours, untouched by the dawn. The snow swirls around him, a white blur that hides his path. Is he smiling, knowing the joy he brings? Or does his gaze hold a flicker of something deeper, something unspoken? He exists in the moment, and yet he exists always, a paradox that both comforts and unsettles. And when the sun rises and the sleigh vanishes, we are left with the faintest echo of bells and the lingering sense that, just for a moment, time itself paused. But even as the day begins, the questions remain. What fuels his eternal flight? What anchors him to this world when everything else moves on? And as long as belief sustains him, will he ever truly rest? A child sits by the fire, eyes wide with wonder, their tiny hands clutching a mug of hot cocoa. The glow of the Christmas tree casts flickering shadows on their face as they listen intently to the tale of Santa Claus. The promise of a jolly figure who rewards good behavior with gifts ignites their imagination. The story feels so real, so magical, that they can almost hear the sleigh bells in the distance. It is a moment of pure innocence, a glimpse into a world where magic exists simply because they believe it does. But somewhere, beyond the glow of that cozy room, a shadow lingers, the inevitable moment when the truth shatters the illusion. The Santa myth, as enchanting as it is, walks a fine line between fantasy and deception. For generations, Parents have played their part in this elaborate charade, crafting stories about the man in the red suit, his flying reindeer, and his mysterious workshop at the North Pole. They leave out cookies and milk, scribble notes in shaky handwriting, and sometimes even stomp across the roof to mimic the sound of sleigh landings. All for the joy of seeing their children's eyes light up in uncontainable glee. But what happens when the illusion cracks? That moment, when a child first begins to question Santa's existence, is a quiet betrayal wrapped in heartbreak. For some, it comes as a slow realization, piecing together inconsistencies. How could Santa be at every mall? How does he reach every home in a single night? For others, it arrives in an unceremonious burst, a classmate's cruel remark, a whispered confession from an older sibling, or even overhearing their parents talk about hiding the gifts. The magic dissipates, leaving behind a void of disillusionment and unanswered questions. The discovery is more than just a loss of belief in Santa. It's the first taste of a harsher reality, a reminder that the world is not as magical as it once seemed. The comforting bubble of childhood wonder pops, revealing the complexities and gray areas of adult life. Some children feel angry, betrayed by the very people they trusted most. Others are quietly sad, mourning the loss of a figure who symbolized kindness, generosity, and whimsy. And then there are those who shrug it off, eager to be in on the secret, but even their nonchalance masks a subtle shift in how they view the world. Parents often justify the Santa lie as harmless, a rite of passage that brings joy and fuels imagination. They argue that the happiness it brings far outweighs the fleeting sting of its unraveling. And yet, there's an unspoken tension in perpetuating the myth. For some adults, lying to their children, even in the name of tradition, carries a twinge of guilt. They wonder if it sets a precedent, if this seemingly innocent fabrication plants the seeds of doubt for future trust. The Santa myth is not universal, and its absence in some cultures raises questions about its necessity. Does belief in Santa add to the magic of childhood, or does it create a falsehood that inevitably sours? Across the globe, children grow up without tales of a man in a red suit yet still experience the joy of giving and receiving. The magic, perhaps, is not in the myth itself, but in the way it's presented, as a symbol of love and togetherness rather than a literal truth. Still, there's something profound about the way belief in Santa lingers. Even after the truth is revealed, many hold onto the spirit of the story. They carry it forward, not as a lie but as a symbol of hope and wonder. The idea of Santa evolves, becoming less about a man who slides down chimneys and more about the feeling he represents, the joy of giving, the warmth of family, the beauty of believing in something greater than oneself. Yet, the impact of that initial discovery never fully fades. It's the first of many moments where the world shifts, where the lines between reality and fantasy blur. For some, it sparks curiosity, a hunger to understand the why behind the lie. For others, it reinforces skepticism, a cautiousness that echoes into adulthood. But for many, it becomes a bittersweet memory, a reminder of a time when magic felt real and the world seemed boundless. As the child by the fire grows older, they may one day find themselves in their parents' shoes, perpetuating the same myth for a new generation. They will leave out cookies, scribble notes, and watch their children's eyes light up with wonder. They'll do it knowing full well that the truth will eventually come out, and that moment will be as inevitable as the dawn. But for a while, they'll revel in the magic, because they understand its fleeting nature. And so, the cycle continues, a delicate dance between truth and fantasy, belief and doubt. Somewhere in that dance lies the essence of Santa Claus, not as a figure of deception but as a bridge between the innocence of childhood and the complexities of adulthood. The bells may grow fainter, the sleigh tracks fade, but the memory of believing in something wondrous lingers, shimmering like the first snowfall under a winter moon. And even as the magic fades, it leaves behind a trace of something unspoken, a yearning, a hope, a quiet whisper that maybe, just maybe, there's more to the story than we can ever truly know. The fire crackles low, casting flickering shadows across the room. A child sits cross-legged on the rug, their eyes fixed on a worn book, its illustrations glowing in the dim light. The story unfolds with a familiar refrain, "He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake." There it is again, the quiet warning hidden within the jovial tale of Santa Claus. But beneath the candy-colored veneer of holiday cheer lies a deeper truth. Santa isn't just a giver of gifts, he's a judge, a moral compass for countless generations. And his role in morality tales is both comforting and unnerving. Santa Claus has long been portrayed as the ultimate arbiter of childhood behavior. The rules are simple: be good, and you'll be rewarded; be bad, and you'll face the consequences. The stakes are clear, the lines unblurred, and the power absolute. For a child, this binary system offers a tangible framework for understanding right and wrong. But for parents, Santa's omniscience becomes a tool, an invisible force to enforce discipline. Santa's watching, they say, a phrase that carries both the weight of expectation and the promise of reward. The roots of this moral dynamic run deeper than the jolly figure we know today. Santa's origins are steeped in folklore, where figures like Saint Nicholas, Krampus, and Belsnickel played roles far more complex than mere gift-givers. These characters were enforcers of morality, their presence designed to instill fear as much as joy. Saint Nicholas, for all his benevolence, was often accompanied by darker counterparts: Krampus, who punished the wicked, or Belsnickel, who doled out switches to the disobedient. Together, they represented a duality: kindness tempered by justice, generosity balanced by retribution. Even in his modern form, Santa retains echoes of these older traditions. The idea of the naughty list serves as a gentle yet firm reminder that actions have consequences. It's a tool of accountability, a way to teach children that their behavior matters. But it also introduces a curious dichotomy: Santa is both the benevolent giver and the silent judge. His presence is felt but never seen, his judgment rendered without appeal. For a child, this can be both magical and unsettling, a mix of wonder and quiet unease. Yet Santa's role in morality tales isn't confined to childhood lessons. On a broader level, he embodies societal ideals of selflessness, generosity, and kindness. His story encourages sharing, compassion, and the importance of thinking beyond oneself. The act of giving, symbolized by Santa's endless sack of gifts, becomes a moral lesson in and of itself. It teaches that joy is found not just in receiving but in making others happy. But there's a darker side to this moral framework. For some, the emphasis on behavior can create anxiety, a fear of not being good enough. The idea of an all-seeing figure who judges every action can feel oppressive, even suffocating. And in families where the naughty list is wielded as a tool of control, the magic of Santa can twist into something more sinister, leaving a child feeling unworthy or unloved. Then there's the question of fairness. Santa's rewards, in practice, often reflect a family's socioeconomic status more than a child's behavior. A well-behaved child in a struggling household may receive far less than a misbehaving one in a wealthy family. This disparity, though unintentional, can create confusion and resentment, undermining the moral lessons Santa is meant to impart. Still, Santa's role as a moral figure endures, evolving with the times. In modern tales, his focus has shifted slightly, emphasizing not just individual behavior but collective values. Stories of Santa encouraging environmental stewardship, acts of charity, or standing against bullying reflect broader societal shifts. He becomes not just a symbol of personal morality but a beacon of communal ethics, a figure who inspires us to be better not just for ourselves but for the world around us. The child on the rug reaches the end of the story, the last illustration showing Santa's sleigh disappearing into the night sky. The book closes with a soft thud, and they look up, their face alight with both wonder and thought. They don't yet realize the layers of meaning woven into the tale, the complex interplay of magic and morality, joy and judgment. For now, Santa is simply Santa, a source of gifts and giggles, a figure who makes the world feel a little brighter. But someday, when the child grows older and the magic fades, they may think back to the quiet lessons hidden within the stories. They'll remember the promise of reward for kindness, the warning against mischief, and the unspoken truth that the world is shaped not just by what we take, but by what we give. And perhaps, as they watch their own child's face light up at the mention of Santa Claus, they'll feel a flicker of that old magic, mingled with the knowledge that morality, like belief, is a gift passed down through the ages. A gift that asks nothing in return but the hope that it will be cherished and shared. And as the story of Santa continues, the line between myth and meaning blurs, leaving behind a timeless lesson that kindness, generosity, and the quiet pursuit of goodness are as enduring as the man in the red suit himself. The snow falls softly outside, blanketing the world in a quiet stillness, while inside, families gather to share laughter, stories, and the warmth of giving. Gifts are exchanged, some lavish and some small, but each one carries a weight far greater than its material worth. It is a moment that transcends the tangible, a ritual that connects hearts. And at the center of it all, unseen yet deeply felt, is the figure of Santa Claus, a symbol, a story, a collective dream. He is more than just a character in a red suit. He is an archetype, rooted in the shared human longing for generosity, for connection, for something greater than ourselves. Santa is a reflection of humanity's idealized self, a figure who embodies the act of giving without expecting anything in return. In his mythos, we see our deepest yearnings brought to life, the desire to spread joy, to provide for those we love, and to create moments of magic in a world often devoid of it. But beneath the twinkling lights and cheerful carols lies a profound psychological truth. Santa exists not just as a character in stories, but as an archetype that taps into the collective unconscious. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung spoke of archetypes as universal symbols and patterns that reside within the human psyche. They are the shared dreams and instincts that transcend time and culture, shaping how we see the world and ourselves. Santa fits this mold perfectly, not as a literal figure, but as an embodiment of the archetype of the benevolent giver. He represents the part of us that yearns to be selfless, to give freely, to embody kindness in its purest form. What makes Santa so enduring, so universally beloved, is his ability to adapt to the collective needs of society. In times of scarcity or hardship, he becomes a symbol of hope, reminding us that generosity can thrive even in the darkest winters. In moments of excess, he serves as a gentle reminder of the importance of sharing our abundance with others. He is both a mirror and a guide, reflecting our values while nudging us toward our better selves. But Santa's generosity is not just about material gifts. His story carries an undercurrent of emotional giving, the idea that the greatest gift we can offer is our presence, our love, and our attention. The act of waiting for Santa, of believing in his visit, creates a shared moment of wonder that binds families together. It is not the gifts under the tree that linger in memory, but the feeling of being part of something larger, something magical. And yet, Santa's archetype is not without complexity. For every image of him joyfully delivering presents, there is an unspoken question: what drives such boundless giving? Is it pure altruism, or is there something deeper, more primal at work? Some myths suggest that Santa's generosity is fueled by the belief and joy of those he serves, creating a cycle of giving that sustains both the giver and the receiver. In this way, he becomes a symbol of reciprocity, a reminder that acts of kindness ripple outward, touching lives in ways we may never see. On a societal level, Santa represents a collective dream of abundance. He lives in a world where resources are limitless, where everyone's needs can be met without fear of scarcity. His endless sack of gifts is a metaphor for a world we long for, a world where no child goes to bed hungry, no family feels forgotten, and no one is left behind. In imagining Santa, we are imagining a better version of our reality, one where generosity triumphs over greed and community outweighs individualism. But Santa is also a product of cultural and psychological shifts. In the commercialized world of the 20th and 21st centuries, his image has been co-opted by advertising and consumerism, turning the act of giving into a transaction. Yet, even amid the glitter of storefronts and the rush of holiday sales, the deeper archetype persists. Beneath the surface, Santa remains a symbol of something pure, a reminder that true generosity comes from the heart, not the wallet. For children, Santa represents the first encounter with the concept of altruism. They learn that being good is rewarded not because it benefits them directly, but because it contributes to the happiness of others. And even when they outgrow the literal belief in Santa, the lesson lingers. It becomes part of their internal moral compass, shaping how they view the world and their place within it. As adults, we carry the Santa archetype within us, whether we realize it or not. Every act of kindness, every moment of selflessness, is a nod to the benevolent giver who resides in our collective imagination. When we slip a few extra coins into a charity box, leave an anonymous gift on a doorstep, or simply offer a listening ear to someone in need, we are channeling the spirit of Santa. He is not just a story we tell, he is a story we live. And so, the figure of Santa endures, not because of the gifts he delivers, but because of the values he embodies. He is a reminder that generosity is not about the size of the gift, but the intention behind it. He is the whisper in the winter wind, urging us to give more, love more, and believe more in each other, in ourselves, and in the quiet magic of human connection. As the snow continues to fall and the world settles into the hush of the season, the collective dream of Santa lingers, woven into the fabric of our hearts. And in that dream, we find not just a figure in a red suit, but the best version of ourselves, a version that gives without asking, loves without limit, and finds joy in the act of bringing joy to others. The story doesn't end here, for as long as the dream lives on, so too does the magic of Santa, echoing in every act of kindness, and every gift given with an open heart, and in every moment of shared wonder under the winter sky. The holiday season begins with a familiar hum, carols echoing through mall speakers, the clatter of shopping carts, the sharp clicks of online purchases being made. For weeks, the world shifts into high gear, driven by the glow of twinkling lights and the promise of gifts beneath the tree. But behind the warm facade of holiday cheer lies a machine of staggering proportions, a phenomenon fueled by the mythical figure of Santa Claus. It is more than tradition, it is an economic engine, one that transforms the global economy every year into a frenzy of consumption, production, and profit. Santa, for all his magic and myth, is the silent driver of a retail explosion that begins in late fall and peaks in December. His image, etched into everything from soda cans to luxury watches, is a universal signal of giving. The sight of him, jolly and bright, triggers an almost Pavlovian response: shop, spend, celebrate. This isn't merely about the joy of gifting, it's a cornerstone of economic survival for millions. In the United States alone, holiday spending accounts for over $1 trillion annually. Entire industries thrive on the back of Santa's sleigh, from toy manufacturers and electronics companies to wrapping paper producers and delivery services. For many businesses, the fourth quarter determines their success for the year, their profit margins teetering on the edge of holiday sales. Santa is not just a symbol of generosity, he's a lifeline for the retail sector. But the Christmas economy extends far beyond storefronts and online carts. It's a global web, connecting cocoa farmers in Ghana who supply chocolate for holiday treats, factory workers in China assembling toys and decorations, and shipping companies navigating icy waters to deliver goods. Every snow globe, every box of ornaments, every festive sweater passes through countless hands before reaching its destination, each step a link in an enormous chain of commerce that Santa's story sustains. The advertising industry also owes much of its annual success to the Santa-fueled season. Major brands pour billions into crafting campaigns that align their products with the magic of Christmas. The Coca-Cola Santa, for example, is a masterstroke of marketing that transformed not just the brand, but the holiday itself. In associating Santa's cheerful image with their product, Coca-Cola didn't just sell soda, they sold nostalgia, happiness, and tradition, intangibles that resonate across generations. And then there are the smaller economies built around the holiday spirit. Local craft fairs, Christmas markets, and pop-up shops offer artisans and small businesses a chance to capitalize on the season. The demand for handmade ornaments, unique gifts, and custom cards surges as people seek items imbued with personal meaning. Santa's influence trickles down, touching the livelihoods of those who depend on holiday cheer to make ends meet. Yet, beneath the glittering surface of this economic miracle lies a tension that's hard to ignore. The pressure to spend during the holidays creates financial strain for many families. Credit card debt often spikes in December as parents strive to fulfill their children's Santa-inspired wish lists. The joy of giving, while magical, sometimes comes at a cost that lingers long after the lights come down and the trees are packed away. This tension extends to the workers who make the Christmas economy possible. Warehouse employees, retail staff, and delivery drivers face grueling hours and high demands as businesses scramble to meet the season's relentless pace. For many, the holidays bring not warmth and joy but exhaustion and stress as they work tirelessly to uphold the illusion of effortless holiday magic. Santa, as an economic force, also raises questions about sustainability. The surge in consumption during the holidays creates a ripple effect of waste, discarded wrapping paper, single-use decorations, and mountains of plastic toys that often end up in landfills. The carbon footprint of global production and transportation skyrockets as companies rush to deliver on Santa's promise. The very story that inspires joy and togetherness also leaves an undeniable environmental cost. Despite these challenges, Santa's economic impact is a testament to the power of shared belief. His story creates a collective urgency that drives not just spending but also innovation. Retailers develop new technologies to streamline online shopping, logistics companies refine systems to handle the avalanche of deliveries. Even the smallest businesses find creative ways to stand out in the crowded marketplace, their ingenuity fueled by the need to participate in the Christmas economy. And it's not just businesses that benefit. Charitable giving spikes during the holidays, inspired by the spirit of generosity that Santa embodies. Food banks, toy drives, and nonprofits see a surge in donations as individuals channel their belief in Santa's ethos into real-world action. The economy of Christmas, then, is not purely commercial, it is also an economy of kindness, one where the intangible value of giving extends far beyond the price tags. The story of Santa is, at its heart, a story of abundance. It is the promise that there is enough joy, enough love, enough gifts to go around. This belief, however fleeting, fuels the economic bonfire that keeps countless industries alive. It is a testament to the enduring power of myth, the way a single story can shape not just culture but commerce. And yet, the machine rolls on, its gears turning faster as the season approaches its climax. Somewhere in the bustle of crowded malls and the click of online carts, the true heart of the Christmas economy beats quietly, the act of giving, not as an obligation but as a choice. Santa, for all his economic might, is not just a driver of spending, he is a reminder of what lies beneath it all, the simple joy of making someone smile, the quiet magic of a gift given with love. The snow outside begins to settle, and the world readies itself for another season of lights, laughter, and the relentless rhythm of the Christmas economy. Beneath it all, Santa watches silently, not as a man, but as an idea, a shared dream that moves markets, fuels industries, and, for a moment, brings the world together in the spirit of giving. The story doesn't end when the last gift is unwrapped. The engine of belief continues, pulsing through each act of generosity, each moment of connection, ensuring that Santa's influence, both magical and material, endures long after the season fades. The twinkling lights of the season may cast a warm glow, but for many, they also illuminate a hidden weight, the expectation to make Christmas perfect. The legend of Santa Claus, with his boundless generosity and unfailing jolliness, carries a subtle yet immense societal pressure. Beneath the smiles and laughter lies an often unspoken truth. Santa's myth, for all its magic, weaves a web of obligations that touches every corner of life during the holidays. For parents, Santa's promise can feel like a double-edged sword. The joy of creating magic for their children is undeniable, but so too is the stress of meeting the expectations tied to that magic. The wish lists, often inspired by relentless advertising and peer comparisons, grow longer and more expensive each year. Parents feel the weight of ensuring their children believe, not just in Santa, but in the idealized version of Christmas he represents. Every gift, every decoration, every moment must align with an imagined perfection, a picture painted by centuries of tradition and modern commercialism. The pressure doesn't stop at the family doorstep. Social obligations during the holiday season can be overwhelming, as Santa's image of unending generosity seeps into broader societal expectations. Holiday parties, office gift exchanges, community events all come with their own set of unspoken rules. Gifts must be thoughtful yet within budget, decorations must be festive yet tasteful, and participation must be enthusiastic, even if one's heart isn't in it. For those who struggle financially, emotionally, or both, the season's demands can feel suffocating. Santa's legend also imposes expectations on behavior. For children, the concept of being naughty or nice turns moral development into a seasonal performance. The constant reminder that Santa is watching can create anxiety, turning the promise of gifts into a form of control. For adults, the pressure to embody holiday cheer, to be giving, joyful, and festive, can feel like a mask they're forced to wear, even when their personal circumstances make such emotions difficult to summon. The cultural pressure tied to Santa extends across all layers of society, affecting not just individuals but entire communities. Teachers and caregivers feel compelled to create holiday magic in classrooms and care facilities, often dipping into their own time and resources. Retail workers face relentless demands as the season wraps up, enduring long hours and impatient customers. For those in less fortunate circumstances, the gap between the idealized Christmas and their reality can feel particularly stark. Santa's image, meant to inspire joy, can inadvertently highlight inequality and unmet desires. For many, these pressures are compounded by the constant comparisons encouraged by social media. Pictures of perfectly decorated trees, piles of gifts, and lavish holiday feasts flood timelines, creating a feedback loop of envy and inadequacy. Santa, as a symbol of abundance, becomes a benchmark against which people measure their own holiday efforts. The weight of these comparisons can turn what should be a season of joy into one of silent competition. And then there are the unseen sacrifices made to uphold the legend. Parents working extra shifts to afford the latest toy, families skipping necessities to ensure there are gifts under the tree, or individuals stretching themselves thin to meet the myriad demands of the season. The myth of Santa, for all its charm, can unintentionally place people in impossible situations where the fear of falling short overshadows the spirit of the holiday. This weight is not borne equally. Women, in particular, often carry the brunt of holiday responsibilities, from gift shopping to meal planning to decorating. The cultural expectation to make Christmas magical for their families can leave them exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Meanwhile, men may face societal pressure to finance these efforts, creating a different but equally heavy burden. Together, these expectations form a cycle that repeats year after year, as families strive to meet an ideal that is as elusive as it is ingrained. Yet amid all this pressure, the myth of Santa also reveals a deeper truth about human connection. The stress tied to his legend often stems not from the legend itself, but from the desire to create joy for others. Parents endure sleepless nights wrapping gifts not out of obligation but out of love. Friends exchange presents not to compete but to show they care. Communities rally around holiday events not for appearances but to bring people together. The weight of Santa's expectations, though heavy, is often borne willingly, a testament to the enduring power of the season's underlying message. But the question lingers, at what cost? When the tinsel is packed away and the credit card bills arrive, the emotional and financial toll of meeting Santa's expectations becomes clear. For many, the aftermath of the holiday season is a time of reckoning, a sobering contrast to the joy and magic of December. And yet, when the next season rolls around, the cycle begins anew, driven by the collective belief in Santa's promise and the hope that this year, the balance will tilt closer to joy than stress. The snow falls outside, softening the edges of the world, as another holiday season approaches its peak. Within homes, within hearts, the pressure builds, yet so too does the resolve to make it all worthwhile. The story of Santa, for all its demands, remains a beacon of hope, a reminder of what it means to give and to love. Even under the weight of expectation, there is magic in the effort, a quiet beauty in the striving. And perhaps, that is where the true heart of the holiday lies, not in perfection, but in the imperfect, unspoken acts of care that keep the legend alive. It's a cold December night, and the world outside is cloaked in a blanket of snow. The wind howls, and the stars blink down like quiet spectators, watching as something extraordinary is about to unfold. Families are nestled inside, gathered around fireplaces, yet the feeling in the air is electric. Something is happening. Somewhere, perhaps in a quiet corner of the world, someone has just seen him. Santa Claus. But not in the way we expect. This isn't a jolly old man in a red suit, his sleigh parked at the North Pole. No, this Santa is something different. He is a figure cloaked in mystery, appearing when least expected, stirring up stories that last for generations. The idea of Santa Claus, beyond the gifts and cheer, is a figure of wonder, and in the shadows of his legend lie strange, unexplainable sightings, urban legends that capture the imagination, hinting that maybe, just maybe, there is something more to this myth than we've ever realized. There are those who claim they've seen Santa on rooftops, late at night, in the midst of a winter storm. The first sighting often begins with a glimpse of movement, a flicker in the corner of the eye, a shadow too large to be a trick of the light. It's just after midnight, when everything is still, the streets empty save for a few stray snowflakes. Then, out of nowhere, he appears. A figure dressed in red, large and unmistakable, moving with a grace that belies his size. Some swear they've seen him leap from house to house, his sleigh rising into the air with an almost supernatural ease. For those who've witnessed it, the sighting isn't just a fleeting moment. It's an experience, one that lodges itself in the mind and refuses to leave. They say there is something about Santa's presence, something almost divine, that fills the air with a strange magic. The air feels heavier, like the world is holding its breath. For just a second, time itself seems to pause, giving way to the impossible. And then, just as quickly as he appeared, he's gone, leaving only the flicker of a distant sleigh bell in the wind. It's this mysteriousness that has bred countless urban legends about Santa Claus. Over the years, stories have surfaced of people finding strange markings in the snow, long after the snow has stopped falling, boot prints too large to be human, leading up to a chimney or a tree, only to vanish without a trace. Sometimes, the footprints are accompanied by a faint scent of pine and cinnamon, lingering in the cold air as if the very essence of Christmas has been left behind. One of the more famous tales comes from a small town in the Midwest, where a group of children claim to have seen Santa standing in the middle of a snowy field late one night. The children, huddled together in the safety of their homes, had been watching for him, eagerly hoping for a glimpse. They had heard stories, legends passed down from older generations about Santa's mysterious appearances, but never had they believed it would happen to them. That is, until that fateful night. One child, looking out from a bedroom window, noticed something moving in the distance. As they squinted into the night, the figure grew larger, and there, in the clearing, was the unmistakable red suit. He stood perfectly still, watching, before he disappeared into the swirling snow. To this day, no one knows who the figure was, or what they truly saw, but the story has been passed down, whispered in the quiet corners of homes each holiday season. Urban legends about Santa don't always stay confined to snow-covered towns. Cities, too, have their own strange encounters. In one such case, a young woman was walking home late on Christmas Eve, the streets eerily empty as the city settled in for the night. As she walked past a darkened alleyway, she noticed movement, someone standing in the shadows. Curious, she approached, only to find a figure dressed in red, his face obscured by a hood. He was silent, his presence almost palpable. Before she could speak, the figure raised his hand, as though signaling her to stay silent, and then vanished without a sound. The most chilling urban legends, however, are the ones that carry a darker undertone. Some people claim to have encountered Santa's shadow, a figure dressed in the same red garb, but with a twisted, unnatural air about him. These stories describe Santa not as a benevolent gift-bringer, but as a strange, ethereal being, moving in and out of sight, existing in places where logic and time don't quite align. In some of these tales, Santa's appearance is said to be accompanied by odd occurrences, electrical malfunctions, clocks spinning backward, or a sudden shift in temperature as though the very world is bending around him. There are also those who say that Santa doesn't just visit the good, he sometimes appears when least expected, offering not gifts, but warnings. In these accounts, people report waking in the middle of the night to find Santa watching them, his eyes dark and knowing, his silence unnerving. These sightings often come with a sense of dread, as if his presence is not meant to inspire joy, but to remind the observer of something lost, something forgotten. It's as though Santa, in his endless journey across time and space, has become something more, an entity with knowledge that stretches far beyond mere holiday cheer. Perhaps the most unsettling part of these sightings is the way they blur the line between myth and reality. People who claim to have experienced these strange occurrences are often left questioning their own minds. Was it a dream? A trick of the light? Or, as some suggest, was it truly Santa, caught between worlds, leaving behind only whispers and snowflakes to mark his passage? The myth of Santa Claus has been with us for centuries, woven into the fabric of our collective consciousness. But in the shadows of his legend, there are stories that defy logic, that unsettle the heart and stir the imagination. From sightings in quiet towns to inexplicable events in bustling cities, the legend of Santa continues to inspire awe, wonder, and mystery. In the end, it's the unanswered questions that make these stories so captivating. Santa, in all his mystery, leaves us with a sense of something greater, something beyond our understanding. Whether it's a glimpse of red on a rooftop or a fleeting figure in the snow, these sightings remind us that there is magic in the world, hidden, elusive, and forever tied to the spirit of Christmas. And as each holiday season unfolds, we are left wondering, what if, just maybe, there is more to the story than we know? The chill of winter settles in, and the world grows quiet under a blanket of snow. Yet, in the stillness, an inexplicable sense of wonder lingers in the air, as if the very fabric of reality itself is bending around the legend of Santa Claus. Could it be that the origins of this iconic figure are not simply tied to folklore, but to something far greater? Something from the stars? Or perhaps, from the gods themselves? The legend of Santa Claus is undeniably steeped in mystery, and for many, it remains a comforting symbol of generosity, joy, and holiday magic. But for others, there is a more unusual theory, a theory that suggests that Santa's origins stretch far beyond mere myth and tradition. Some believe that Santa, with his jolly demeanor, red suit, and ability to traverse the globe in a single night, may be linked to extraterrestrial beings or even ancient gods. The first thread of this theory is the most obvious: Santa's sleigh. It is a key part of his myth, a magical vehicle that allows him to visit millions of homes in the span of a few hours. But what if it's not just any sleigh? What if it's something far more advanced, something capable of defying the laws of physics? Some theorists have speculated that Santa's sleigh is actually a spacecraft, one designed for interdimensional travel. The fact that it's described as flying through the air with the power to travel at impossible speeds could be interpreted as evidence of advanced technology, far beyond the capabilities of any earthly vehicle. But the sleigh isn't the only thing that raises questions. Santa himself is a figure that defies explanation. His ability to live for centuries, his omnipresence during the holidays, and his supernatural ability to know whether children have been naughty or nice could be seen as characteristics more fitting for a god or an alien than a mere man. Some believe that Santa's immortality and his ability to move through time and space suggest he might not be human at all, but rather an extraterrestrial being with advanced knowledge of our world and its people. In fact, there are several theories that tie Santa's myth to ancient gods and celestial beings. One such theory draws connections between Santa and the Norse god Odin. Odin, much like Santa, is known for his travels through the sky, his ability to see everything that happens on Earth, and his association with winter and the Yule season. Odin was said to ride an 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, across the skies during the winter solstice, much like Santa's 8 reindeer are said to pull his sleigh across the world. Both figures are associated with bringing gifts to children and offering protection during the coldest months of the year. It's easy to see how Santa's reindeer could be linked to Odin's Sleipnir, but the connection goes even deeper. Odin was often depicted as a wise and powerful figure, with the ability to look into the hearts and minds of people, knowing whether they had been good or bad. This mirrors Santa's own naughty or nice list, a moral ledger that determines who will receive gifts and who will not. The parallels are uncanny, and many theorists believe that the modern image of Santa Claus may have been influenced by Odin's attributes, his magical powers, and his role as a gift bringer. Another fascinating theory connects Santa to extraterrestrial life. Some theorists suggest that Santa's ability to travel the world in one night is a sign that he has access to technology far beyond our own. The idea of a sleigh capable of flying at breakneck speeds, dodging obstacles like buildings and trees, and making precise landings on rooftops in the dead of night seems almost impossible, unless, of course, we're dealing with technology that we can't yet comprehend. Could Santa's sleigh be a UFO? And could Santa himself be a benevolent alien who visits Earth once a year to spread joy and deliver gifts to the children of the world? This theory posits that Santa is not just a figure of folklore, but an extraterrestrial visitor who comes to Earth as part of a cosmic tradition. Some even claim that the reindeer could be symbolic of alien creatures, each with their own powers and significance. The ability to travel through space and time, to navigate the entire globe in a single night, could be evidence that Santa and his sleigh are tied to forces beyond our world, forces that exist in the far reaches of space. Adding to the intrigue is the fact that Santa is often described as having an almost otherworldly appearance. His round belly, his laughter that shakes like a bowl full of jelly, and his ability to appear and disappear without warning, all of these characteristics could be seen as strange and unexplainable. In some alien encounter reports, witnesses describe similar figures, mysterious beings with a presence that feels both comforting and unsettling, figures that appear without warning, offering gifts or assistance in times of need. Could Santa, with his strange ability to appear in the most unlikely of places, be one of these cosmic visitors, a being from beyond the stars who has adopted the guise of a benevolent gift-bringer? There are also those who point to Santa's ability to read people's minds and understand their deepest desires as evidence of his connection to an ancient, godlike power. Throughout history, gods and deities have been portrayed as having the ability to see into the hearts and minds of mortals, understanding their hopes, fears, and desires. Santa's naughty or nice list is a reflection of this ancient tradition, a reminder that the divine, or the extraterrestrial, has the power to know and judge us. So, what are we to make of these theories linking Santa Claus to extraterrestrial or divine origins? Are they simply the product of overactive imaginations, or could there be some truth hidden beneath the surface of the legend? While the answer remains elusive, one thing is certain: Santa's origins are shrouded in mystery. His ability to transcend time, space, and even the laws of physics challenges our understanding of what's possible, leaving us to wonder if the man in the red suit is more than just a story passed down through generations. Perhaps, in the end, it doesn't matter whether Santa is an alien, a god, or simply a figment of holiday magic. What matters is the feeling he evokes, the joy, the wonder, and the belief that anything is possible. The story of Santa reminds us that there is still mystery in the world, that there is still magic to be found, whether in the stars above or the stories we tell. And as long as we continue to believe, the legend of Santa will live on, transcending time, space, and even the boundaries of our own imagination. It's the most magical time of the year, a time when joy fills the air and families gather around the tree. But behind the twinkling lights and festive cheer lies a far more unsettling reality. Picture this: a man in a red suit, with a team of reindeer soaring through the sky, peering down on the world. The very idea of Santa Claus, the one who knows who's naughty and who's nice, carries with it an eerie undercurrent, one that suggests a much darker presence in our lives. Santa is not just a symbol of holiday cheer, but a figure who operates as the ultimate surveillance agent. Santa, as we know him, is constantly watching. He knows your deepest desires, your secret wishes, and even the smallest missteps. The notion that Santa keeps a list of every child's behavior, meticulously checked twice, isn't just a heartwarming part of the myth. It's a chilling reminder that someone, or something, is watching at all times. This idea of surveillance doesn't just end with the holidays. It stretches far beyond, hinting at a much larger, more insidious idea of control. Santa isn't just a bringer of gifts, he is the arbiter of morality, the silent judge who passes his judgment on the world, and that judgment is tied to how well we conform to societal expectations. Think about the way Santa knows everything about us. In this myth, there are no secrets. He knows whether we've been good or bad, and that knowledge is used as leverage to dictate our actions. In a world where privacy is an ever-shrinking commodity, Santa's omniscient gaze echoes the ever-growing reach of surveillance in our own society. In a sense, Santa Claus embodies the perfect surveillance state, one that doesn't rely on cameras or satellites, but on the trust that the watcher knows more than anyone ever could. And it's not just children who are under watch. The figure of Santa suggests that all are accountable, from the youngest to the oldest. His list is all-encompassing, no one is exempt from the moral evaluation. In this way, Santa becomes a figurehead for a broader cultural message, that behavior is constantly being assessed, that we are all subject to scrutiny, whether we are aware of it or not. His power is rooted not in the gifts he gives, but in the constant reminder that we are being observed and judged. Critics in this fictional debate argue that Santa's sleigh, fueled by magic rather than clean energy, is a symbol of environmental excess. What about the carbon footprint of those reindeer, flying around the world in one night? Surely their hooves, pounding across the globe, leave behind some environmental toll. Even if the sleigh's propulsion system is entirely magical, the implication remains that such excess is unsustainable in a warming world. Could Santa be leading children down a path of consumerism where excessive gift-giving overshadows the environmental costs? What message does his ability to deliver so many gifts, in such a short amount of time, send to a world that must reckon with the consequences of overconsumption? Some modern storytellers have even imagined Santa as a climate activist, working alongside scientists and world leaders to save the very planet that he calls home. In these narratives, Santa's role shifts from merely delivering presents to becoming a protector of the earth. He might be seen as gathering children's wishes and dreams, not for toys, but for solutions to heal the planet. In one tale, Santa might even partner with environmental organizations to reduce waste, encouraging sustainable gift-giving and eco-friendly practices. He would advocate for the reforestation of the North Pole and the protection of the Arctic, showing that even the most magical beings have a responsibility to care for the planet. On the other hand, some argue that Santa's magic can't be confined to the same logic that governs our understanding of the world. Santa, they argue, exists outside the realm of reality, and therefore can't be held accountable for the environmental crises we face. In this view, Santa is an embodiment of the timeless spirit of Christmas, beyond the bounds of scientific reasoning and environmental concerns. His existence is more about hope, generosity, and joy, not about the practicalities of modern-day challenges. Yet, even in this line of thinking, Santa's connection to climate change is a curious one. For centuries, the story of Santa Claus has been grounded in a sense of place, the icy, snowy North Pole. It's where his workshop hums with activity, where elves craft toys, and where reindeer are trained for their epic journey across the world. But as the effects of climate change have become increasingly apparent, this very image of the North Pole is beginning to unravel. Could Santa's magical home simply fade into myth? Could his story, like the ice it's built upon, melt away in the face of undeniable reality? In real-world debates, Santa has become a metaphor for a larger conversation about the environmental cost of our celebrations. Christmas, with its high demand for goods, travel, and waste, has long been criticized for contributing to the strain on the environment. The gifts under the tree, the wrapping paper, the food waste, all of it adds to the growing environmental toll. The debate, while seemingly lighthearted at first, is rooted in the very real concern that our holiday traditions are unsustainable. And with the North Pole, that sacred home of Santa, disappearing before our eyes, the symbolism of the holiday feels all the more urgent. Some people have taken the idea of Santa's environmental impact to heart, creating campaigns aimed at reducing the carbon footprint of the holiday season. There are efforts to promote greener Christmas practices, such as sustainable gift wrapping, reducing energy consumption in holiday decorations, and even rethinking the amount of gift-giving itself. Santa, it seems, is now being used as a rallying cry for those who want to preserve the magic of the season while also protecting the planet. At the same time, the connection between Santa and climate change serves as a powerful reminder of how much is at stake. The decline of the North Pole is not just the stuff of folklore, it's a real and tangible loss. The Arctic, home to countless species and ecosystems, is rapidly changing. Santa's very existence, tied so closely to this vanishing land, serves as a poignant symbol of the fragility of the world we live in. And as we debate Santa's role in the climate change discussion, we are reminded of the larger, more pressing issue at hand, the survival of the planet itself. In a world where the North Pole is no longer as untouchable as it once was, Santa's role in climate change is more than just an imaginary debate. It's a reflection of the deeper concerns we face as individuals, communities, and as a global society. Whether he continues to reside in the snowy expanses of the Arctic or is forced to adapt to a new reality, one thing remains clear: the magic of Christmas, much like the planet itself, is fragile, and it's up to all of us to protect it. The night is still, the world draped in the soft glow of Christmas lights, but something is missing. The familiar figure of Santa Claus, with his snowy beard and twinkling eyes, is nowhere to be found. No sleigh bells jingling in the distance, no reindeer pawing at the roof. Instead, a silence stretches across the globe, as if the very essence of Christmas has been taken away. What would a world without Santa Claus look like? What would Christmas become if the legend that has shaped the holiday for centuries simply faded into myth? Without Santa, the very rhythm of Christmas would shift. For generations, his arrival has been the heart of the holiday, a symbol of generosity, kindness, and the magic of the season. But what if the world no longer looked to him for joy, for wonder, or for gifts? What would fill the void left behind by this beloved figure? The most obvious change would be in the way we celebrate. Christmas as we know it has long been centered around the idea of gift-giving, with Santa Claus as the magical deliverer of presents. The excitement of waking up to find stockings filled, the thrill of seeing gifts under the tree, and the age-old question of whether you've made it onto the nice list, these traditions have all been shaped by the presence of Santa. Without him, it's hard to imagine how these rituals would continue. Would we still exchange gifts with the same fervor? Would the emphasis on presents remain, or would it shift to other forms of expression, like spending time with loved ones or sharing experiences instead of material goods? Gift-giving itself might evolve. The magic of Santa has long fueled the consumer frenzy that Christmas sparks, but in a world without him, the focus could move toward different ways of connecting. Gifts might become more personal, more meaningful, and less about the spectacle. Families and friends might focus on handmade gifts, or perhaps the idea of giving could evolve into something that benefits the community, donations to those in need, collective experiences rather than individual presents. The absence of Santa could also encourage a new kind of celebration, one focused on giving rather than receiving, where the true spirit of Christmas is found in acts of kindness and togetherness rather than in the exchange of goods. Without Santa, the pressure to live up to the expectations of a magical, perfect holiday might ease. The comparison to Santa's flawless ability to deliver gifts to every child, everywhere, has often cast a shadow over Christmas. It's an ideal, and an impossible one at that. With no Santa to live up to, Christmas could take on a more realistic tone, focused not on the perfect decorations or the perfectly wrapped presents, but on the simple joys of spending time with those you love. In Germany, the story of the Krampusnacht, or the Night of Krampus, is a particularly chilling tale tied to the darker side of Christmas lore. Krampus, the horned, demonic figure who accompanies St. Nicholas during the Christmas season, is often seen as the embodiment of retribution for naughty children. In ancient folklore, it was believed that Krampus would not only punish children but could also cause great harm to entire families if they failed to properly honor the season. Parents would whisper to their children that if they were too greedy or unruly, not only would Santa withhold their presents, but Krampus would come to collect them in his terrifying sack. The curse wasn't just about receiving no gifts, it was about being forsaken, abandoned, and left to face the harshness of the winter alone, as the spirits of Christmas punished all who dared to mock the holiday's sacredness. In Italy, La Befana, the Christmas witch, is said to visit homes on the night before Epiphany, leaving gifts for good children and coal for those who've misbehaved. While most people think of her as a benevolent figure, there are darker interpretations. In some parts of Italy, it is believed that if La Befana is angered or if a child's house is not properly prepared for her visit, bad luck will follow. In one particularly disturbing superstition, families who neglected to offer a small token of appreciation to La Befana could be cursed to suffer through an entire year of misfortune. The idea of a forgotten visit, of Christmas being left uncelebrated in the eyes of these mythical figures, is enough to send a chill through anyone who dares to let the holiday slip by unnoticed. And then there's the superstition surrounding Christmas Eve itself. While many associate this night with joy and anticipation, others regard it with suspicion and fear. In some European traditions, it's believed that the veil between the living and the dead is thinnest on Christmas Eve, allowing spirits to cross over. It was once thought that if you didn't keep your home properly prepared for Santa's visit, keeping your hearth burning, ensuring your family was together, and leaving out food for Santa, those spirits would cause mischief and bad luck. Families feared that if they didn't observe the proper customs, their homes would be haunted by restless spirits, bringing misfortune and sorrow throughout the coming year. The notion of Christmas curses extends beyond folklore and superstition. Some believe there's something inherently dangerous about embracing the holiday's excess. It's no secret that the pressure to provide the perfect Christmas, to lavish gifts upon loved ones, and to display an image of unyielding cheer can lead to stress and frustration. Some believe that this very pressure has cursed the holiday itself, trapping people in a cycle of impossible expectations. The Christmas curse manifests not as an ancient ritual, but as a modern-day weight, the curse of burnout, of unrealized dreams, and of too many promises broken. In some regions of the world, it is said that failing to observe the right Christmas traditions can lead to an entire year of bad luck. The superstition warns that if the Christmas tree isn't set up by a certain time, if the decorations are put away too early, or if the Christmas meal isn't prepared properly, bad things will follow. These traditions, tied to the holiday's deepest roots, come with consequences. It's a subtle reminder that even the most joyful of celebrations can carry with them an unseen price. Perhaps the most terrifying of these superstitions revolves around the idea that Santa's judgment isn't just about being naughty or nice. In some cultures, it was believed that if a child or an adult committed an unforgivable transgression during the holiday season, they would face a much darker consequence than simply being left off the gift list. Some believed that they would be cursed by Santa's magical influence, losing everything they held dear, suffering unimaginable loss, or being trapped in a life devoid of happiness and light. It's as though Santa, the bringer of joy, had the power to unleash an eternal winter, a frozen curse that would follow them forever, never allowing warmth or comfort to reach their hearts again. These Christmas curses and superstitions, while fading into the background of modern celebrations, still linger in the air. They remind us that the holiday season isn't just about joy and light, it is also tied to ancient beliefs, to the darker forces that shape these traditions. And somewhere, in the quiet moments of the season, one might wonder, what if the curses are real? What if, beneath the cheer of the season, there's a price to pay for breaking the rules of the holiday, for angering the spirits of Christmas, or for simply forgetting to honor the magic that this time of year holds? For centuries, Santa Claus has been a symbol of joy, gift-giving, and festive cheer. His image, of a jolly man in a red suit, overseeing a magical workshop at the North Pole, has captivated hearts around the world. But in recent years, a new, much more urgent debate has emerged. How does Santa fit into the conversations surrounding climate change, especially considering his Arctic home? As the world grapples with the dire impacts of global warming, Santa has unexpectedly found himself at the center of debates, both fictional and real, about the future of the planet. It starts with the most basic question: where does Santa live? The North Pole, that frosty, remote region that has long been associated with the home of the jolly gift bringer, is no longer as cold and untouched as it once was. In fact, scientists have documented alarming rates of ice melt and shifting ecosystems in the Arctic. The once mighty glaciers are receding at a staggering pace, and what was once a frozen tundra is now increasingly vulnerable to the forces of climate change. For years, the North Pole has been a place of wonder, a nearly mythical location where time stands still and the magic of Christmas flourishes. But as the reality of global warming becomes undeniable, the very existence of Santa's home has come under scrutiny. How can this magical, frost-covered land remain untouched when the rest of the world is heating up? Some argue that Santa's North Pole residence could be the next casualty of climate change. If current trends continue, the polar ice cap could be nearly non-existent in a few decades, leaving Santa and his reindeer stranded in a very different world. What happens to the North Pole if there's no ice left to form his icy domain? Could Santa, as an enduring symbol of the season, be forced to relocate, or worse, could he face extinction along with the habitats that he's always called home? And so, the debates begin. In the fictional world, Santa's role in climate change has sparked heated arguments. For many, the image of Santa, flying his sleigh through the frigid winter skies with his reindeer, is deeply intertwined with the magic of winter. His ability to travel across the globe in a single night, delivering gifts to millions of children, is often seen as a symbol of hope and wonder. But as environmental consciousness grows, so too do questions about Santa's methods. The holiday season, with all its presents and joy, becomes a battleground for the surveillance culture that Santa represents. Parents, too, become agents of surveillance, enacting the same judgment on their children. The phrase "Santa's watching" has become a modern form of behavioral control, a subtle threat used to ensure good behavior in the days leading up to Christmas. In the quiet moments of December, when the glow of Christmas lights illuminates the dark night, parents whisper these words to their children, reminding them that the all-seeing eye is always there, keeping tabs on them. It's a comforting thought, in one sense, knowing that there is someone out there keeping us in check. But it's also a disquieting one, because it reinforces the notion that we are never truly alone. Our actions, our choices, and our mistakes are always being observed. And it's not just the immediate family who participates in this surveillance culture. As the legend of Santa Claus has spread, it's been adopted by entire communities. The idea of being watched by Santa has morphed into a societal norm, where behavior is monitored by neighbors, teachers, and even strangers. Everyone is in on the act, reinforcing the idea that we are always under scrutiny. This cultural belief, passed down through generations, is not merely about moral judgment, it's about the subtle enforcement of conformity. Santa's watchful gaze acts as a mirror to our own society's increasing demand for compliance. Whether it's the expectation to be happy, generous, or compliant with holiday traditions, Santa's ever-watchful presence represents a world in which our actions and desires are constantly being monitored, evaluated, and judged. The idea of surveillance has become more pronounced in the age of technology, but the roots of this concept go back long before the rise of cameras and online tracking. Santa, in a way, represents an early form of this surveillance, a figure who not only observes, but who acts on that information. His power is not just in knowing, but in using that knowledge to reward or punish. The very idea that naughty children get coal is a reflection of a more profound concept, that the observer has the power to affect our lives based on how we are seeing. Santa's system of rewards and punishments is not only a reflection of the holiday spirit, it mirrors the way our modern world operates, a world where information is power, and those who control the information can shape the course of our lives. But it doesn't stop with Santa's watchful eye. The very nature of his list hints at a more unsettling truth. If we can be judged by our actions, then are we not always subject to being kept in check? Santa's list suggests that every moment of our lives, every decision, every choice, is cataloged and evaluated. The very concept of being nice or naughty is a reflection of societal norms, a moral framework that doesn't just dictate what's good or bad, but what's acceptable. This kind of surveillance doesn't just judge actions, it shapes behavior. It forces us to conform to expectations, to be constantly aware of how we are perceived. In a world increasingly dominated by technology, we are constantly told that we are being watched, by social media platforms, by governments, and by corporations. Santa's myth, though centuries old, taps into this modern fear, one that questions our privacy and autonomy. The idea that someone, somewhere, is always watching us becomes more than just a fantastical story. It becomes a metaphor for the pressures of our modern world, where surveillance is no longer a distant concept but a constant reality. In this way, Santa's role as a moral arbiter is not just about rewarding good behavior and punishing bad, it's about the creation of a system where no one is truly free from the watchful eye of the powers that be. Yet, despite the chilling undertones of the Santa surveillance state, there's a paradox at play. Santa's gaze, and all its omnipresence, is still rooted in goodwill. Unlike the faceless surveillance systems of today, his watching is meant to guide, to encourage, and to inspire kindness. The lesson, however, remains the same: our behavior, whether we like it or not, is always being watched, always being judged. And in the quiet of the holiday season, as we gather around the tree, we are reminded once again that nothing is ever truly private. The idea of Santa, while filled with warmth and joy, also holds a reflection of the world we live in, a world where surveillance, judgment, and conformity are ever present, even in our most sacred spaces. The air is crisp with the scent of pine and cinnamon, the world bathed in the soft glow of Christmas lights. Yet beneath this veil of cheer lies a shadow, one that some whisper about but few dare to fully acknowledge. While Christmas is a season of joy, gifts, and togetherness, it is also steeped in strange curses and eerie superstitions that threaten to disrupt the festive calm. Santa, in all his jolly glory, is not immune to these dark tales, and some believe that invoking his name or following certain holiday traditions may bring about nothing but bad luck. It's easy to forget that not every family celebrates Christmas with joy. For some, there's an uneasy feeling that lingers as the holiday approaches, an unspoken fear that perhaps the holiday itself carries with it an ancient weight. From the old wives' tales to whispered warnings passed down through generations, Christmas has a long history of curses and superstitions that tie back to Santa's own myth. To invoke Santa's name, to embrace the holiday too eagerly, could bring about misfortune. These stories, though chilling, have lived on in the dark corners of Christmas lore. One of the most pervasive of these Christmas curses revolves around the belief that certain acts during the season can summon ill fortune. For example, the tradition of hanging mistletoe, which is supposed to bring about love and happiness, can also carry a darker significance. In some cultures, it was believed that if you kissed someone under the mistletoe but didn't marry them, it would bring bad luck, not only for the couple but for the entire family. The very thought of invoking the holiday spirit, meant to spread goodwill, being twisted into a curse is enough to send a shiver down the spine. But even more unsettling are the warnings tied to Santa himself. Perhaps one of the most eerie superstitions involves the belief that the more one celebrates Christmas, the more one risks angering the spirits of the season. In certain parts of Europe, it was once believed that if one did not observe the proper rituals, Santa would punish them. The idea was that Santa's list, both naughty and nice, was not just a measure of behavior, but a divine tally kept by ancient forces. To cross Santa in any way, to celebrate the holiday without proper reverence or respect, could lead to misfortune. Some believed that the failure to properly prepare for Santa's visit could result in the delivery of misfortune instead of gifts, bad luck, sickness, or even financial ruin. A seemingly harmless holiday tradition could quickly spiral into a terrifying curse. It could become less about grandiose displays of generosity and more about the intimate, heartfelt moments that truly define the season. Without Santa, Christmas might also be stripped of its global, universal appeal. For millions, Santa Claus is a figure that transcends borders, one whose legend has been shared across cultures, languages, and nations. His familiar image, brought to life by countless artists, advertisers, and storytellers, is woven into the fabric of Christmas celebrations worldwide. If Santa were no longer part of the tradition, would Christmas retain its global reach? Would other figures, like the Christ child or the figure of Saint Nicholas, rise to fill the gap? Or might Christmas celebrations become more fragmented, shaped by regional traditions and less centered around a single, unifying character? Perhaps, in a world without Santa, Christmas could take on a more spiritual tone. The religious significance of the holiday, often overshadowed by the secular festivities surrounding Santa, could rise to the forefront. For those who celebrate Christmas as the birth of Christ, the holiday might return to its roots, with a renewed focus on the nativity story, on family and faith. Church services, nativity scenes, and prayers might become more prominent, while the material aspects of the holiday fade into the background. On the other hand, some might argue that Christmas could take on an even more secular, community-focused identity without Santa. Without the mythical figure who defines so much of the holiday, Christmas might shift from being a family-centered celebration to a more collective experience. Perhaps there would be larger communal events, charitable initiatives, public gatherings, or festivals designed to bring people together. In this world, Christmas would be a celebration of human connection, a recognition of the goodness in the world, and a time for people to gather regardless of their individual beliefs. But what about the magic? Santa represents the fantastical, the wonder that children feel when they believe in something greater than themselves. In a world without Santa, would that sense of awe and excitement vanish? Or could other figures take his place, creating their own brand of magic? Perhaps the mystery would come not from Santa's sleigh ride, but from new holiday traditions, from the lights that twinkle on a tree or the sound of bells in the distance. Magic, after all, doesn't have to be embodied in one figure alone. It could arise from the stories we tell, the traditions we create, and the way we come together. And what about the children? Without Santa, would their Christmas be less magical? There's something about believing in Santa Claus, something innocent and pure, that captures the essence of childhood wonder. But if Santa's myth no longer shaped their world, perhaps they would find new sources of magic. Perhaps the true magic would come from the love and warmth shared by their families, or from the kindness they see in the world. The absence of Santa might even give children a more grounded, real-world perspective on Christmas, allowing them to focus on the deeper meanings of the season, like generosity, empathy, and love. For many, the loss of Santa might feel like the loss of a part of their childhood, a symbol of the joy and innocence that once defined their holiday seasons. But in a world without Santa, there would still be room for celebration, for connection, and for hope. Christmas, after all, is more than just one figure. It is a season of togetherness, a time to reflect on the things that matter most: love, kindness, and community. Would a world without Santa be darker or brighter? It's hard to say. Perhaps it would be different, in ways both big and small. The magic might change shape, and the traditions might shift, but the heart of Christmas would remain. It would still be a time to gather, to reflect, and to cherish the people who matter most in our lives. Even without Santa, the spirit of Christmas would find a way to live on, maybe in a new form, but no less magical. The world has crumbled. The skies are gray, filled with the ash of 1,000 battles, and the cities, once thriving with laughter and lights, now stand in ruins. Nature has been ravaged by years of human excess, and the cold winds of a dying planet sweep through what remains of civilization. Amidst the decay, a lone figure walks, his silhouette barely visible against the wreckage of a broken world. He carries a sack, its contents unknown, but there's a familiar glimmer in his eyes, a glimmer that hasn't quite been extinguished by the horrors that surround him. Santa Claus is still here, though perhaps not in the way we once imagined. In the midst of dystopian futures, where society has been reduced to mere survival, the myth of Santa could take on a terrifying new form. What happens to a figure so closely tied to joy, generosity, and goodwill when the world has been ravaged by apocalyptic disasters? When hunger, fear, and greed rule the land, how would the legend of Santa evolve? Would he be a savior, or a ghost of a forgotten era? In one dystopian vision, Santa could become a symbol of resistance, a relic of a time when humanity believed in the possibility of goodness. As the world fractures into isolated tribes and warlords fight for control, the image of Santa could evolve into a clandestine figure who secretly delivers not gifts, but hope. In this scenario, he becomes a symbol of rebellion against tyranny. He might not be bringing toys, but instead essential supplies, medicine, food, or weapons for the oppressed. His sleigh might no longer soar through the skies on Christmas Eve, but could instead be a battered vehicle that quietly travels through the night, distributing life-saving resources to those who need them most. Perhaps in this dystopian world, Santa's workshop would no longer be a bustling place full of laughter and joy. Instead, it might become a hidden underground facility, operated by a small group of survivors who carry on the tradition of gift-giving in a world where nothing is guaranteed. The elves, once joyful and merry, might become hardened, survival-focused individuals, using their skills not to make toys, but to create necessities like clean water filters or solar-powered lanterns. In this new world, Santa's mission could be redefined as the fight to keep the human spirit alive in a landscape that's losing hope by the day. Alternatively, Santa's figure could take on a more sinister role in some dystopian futures. In a world where scarcity reigns and resources are hoarded by powerful elites, the idea of Santa might turn into a twisted version of the original myth. What if Santa, once a symbol of giving, was now seen as a cold, calculating enforcer of a new social order? His red suit, once a symbol of joy, could become a uniform of control, with Santa serving as a puppet figure in a totalitarian regime. Instead of delivering presents to children, he might be responsible for the distribution of punishments to those who have failed to obey the harsh laws of this apocalyptic world. In such a scenario, Santa's workshop might be a grim factory, churning out goods that serve the elite, while the majority of the population lives in squalor. The magic of Christmas would be replaced by a chilling surveillance system where citizens are constantly watched, their every move monitored. Santa, now a tool of the state, would no longer be a benevolent figure, but a reminder of how far humanity has fallen. In this world, the story of Santa would be rewritten, used as propaganda to enforce the idea that the gift-giving spirit of Christmas has been replaced by the cold, unyielding hand of control. In another speculative vision, Santa could become a figure of nostalgia in a post-apocalyptic world. As societies collapse, people might cling to old stories, holding onto the memory of better times. Santa, in this scenario, is less a living being and more a symbol of what once was, a distant, idealized past that people long for but cannot return to. Children, orphaned and hungry in this brutal future, might dream of a jolly man who once gave freely to all. The legend would survive through the stories told by elders, passed down as a reminder of a time when the world was whole. Yet in this world, Santa's absence would be felt more acutely. He would become a figure of myth, like the forgotten gods of old, an image of lost innocence, a tragic reminder of how much was lost when the world descended into chaos. Could Santa, too, be a casualty of the apocalypse? In one particularly dark vision, he might be remembered as a victim of the very disaster that ended the world. Maybe, in the end, even Santa couldn't escape the consequences of humanity's recklessness. In this vision, Santa's sleigh crashes, his reindeer scattered to the winds, and his last journey becomes the stuff of legend. The last trace of Christmas spirit dies with him, leaving only the remnants of his broken workshop and the echoes of a time when magic and hope still existed. Without Santa, the world would have lost not only its protector, but the very belief in magic itself. Without him, the idea of joy and wonder could become obsolete, a forgotten dream. Alternatively, Santa could be one of the few figures who survives the apocalypse not as a symbol of generosity, but as a reluctant guardian of the human spirit. In this scenario, he would continue to bring hope, but not in the way we think. Rather than gifts and festivities, his mission would become one of survival, of teaching others how to keep the spark of humanity alive in a world where it's so easy to fall into despair. Santa's sleigh, once a tool for delivering gifts, could be a vessel for carrying survivors to safe havens or transporting important knowledge to those scattered across the wasteland. Maybe Santa's legacy isn't tied to one specific tradition after all. In a world without him, Christmas might still find a way to survive. People might no longer wait for a man in a red suit to bring them presents, but instead could create new rituals, new ways of celebrating the spirit of the season. They might band together to give to each other, focusing on the values of generosity, kindness, and love. Santa's story would be a cautionary tale, a reminder of how humanity's love of excess and its disregard for the planet's health led to destruction. In the absence of Santa, humans might be forced to create their own magic grounded not in fantasy, but in the strength of human resilience. A world without Santa Claus would not simply be one where Christmas fades into obscurity. It would be a world where the idea of Christmas itself transforms into something more desperate, perhaps, but also more real. A world where people learn to find joy in the simplest moments, where generosity isn't tied to mythical figures, and where the true meaning of the holiday is carried on by those who refuse to let the spirit die. Even in a dystopian future, Christmas could endure, perhaps not as we know it, but as something new, something born from the ashes of the old world. Santa may not be there to deliver presents, but the hope he represents could still find a way to survive. Imagine a world where the malls are empty, the jingles have fallen silent, and the once bustling streets that glowed with Christmas lights now stand quiet and deserted. No longer do the stores play loops of jingle bells or display rows of plush red suits, fake beards, and Santa figurines. Santa Claus, that towering symbol of holiday consumerism, has disappeared from the landscape, leaving nothing behind but an eerie calm. Without Santa, the biggest season of the year, Christmas, would undergo a radical transformation, one that shakes the very foundations of the global economy. In the blink of an eye, Santa's role in consumer culture fades. The retailers, once thriving on the promise of festive sales fueled by the myth of Santa's gift-giving prowess, suddenly find themselves without the iconic figure who has long been tied to the season of giving. For years, Santa has been the perfect marketing tool, jolly, generous, and universally loved. His image has been used to sell everything from luxury goods to the simplest toys, tying the holiday spirit directly to consumption. His sleigh ride through the skies became a metaphor for the frenzy of spending, cashing in on the desire to give and receive in grand, material ways. But now, with Santa gone, something deeply unsettling occurs. The entire Christmas industry begins to tremble. The elaborate department store displays, with Santa at their center, fade into memory. Advertising executives scramble to replace him, but nothing else has quite the same pull. The images of reindeer, snowflakes, and glittering ornaments are no longer enough to ignite the same fire in shoppers' hearts. Without Santa to pull the strings of childhood imagination, and without his jolly face staring down from every advertisement, consumers lose their drive to shop. The psychological connection between Christmas and spending begins to unravel. The holiday rush that once took over the world's markets now feels hollow. The stock market, which had relied on the December surge in sales, begins to falter as major retailers report declining profits. The luxurious campaigns designed around Santa's generosity are no longer resonating. People are no longer driven to spend thousands on gifts that were once justified by Santa's mythical generosity. Without Santa, there's no longer that emotional push, the illusion that something magical happens when you purchase the perfect gift. The frenzy of overconsumption that had defined Christmas is now absent, replaced by a growing sense of unease. At first, people might wonder what went wrong. The media would search for answers. They'd blame inflation, economic downturns, and supply chain disruptions, but no one would acknowledge the real cause, the vanishing of Santa, the one symbol that had long been tied to the holiday's consumer appeal. Without him, the narrative that Christmas was a time for receiving material gifts loses its meaning. People begin to ask themselves, what is Christmas without the exchange of presents? The question doesn't have an easy answer. In homes across the world, families sit around their tables, once full of excitement about gifts waiting to be opened, but now unsure of what to do. Christmas feels like a hollow version of itself, a time for reflection rather than the frenzy of purchasing. The once deeply ingrained tradition of carefully selecting the perfect gift becomes less significant. People turn to simpler ways to express their love, perhaps spending time together, sharing memories, or supporting those in need. But the grand consumer spectacle, with its oversized decorations, perfectly manicured trees, and mass-marketed toys, is no longer what it once was. People begin to realize that maybe, just maybe, Christmas was never really about the things they bought in the first place. The void left by Santa doesn't only affect retailers, it also sends shockwaves through global production lines. Factories, once running full-time to meet the demand for the latest Christmas-themed products, socks, snow globes, and endless toys, grind to a halt. Workers, who once rushed to meet the deadlines for mass-produced trinkets, now face uncertainty. Entire industries built around creating the illusion of Christmas cheer begin to collapse under the weight of their own unsustainable production. What happens to the millions of people employed to churn out the seasonal products that once dominated the holiday season? They, too, must find new work as the demand for these goods vanishes. The corporate giants, who had once depended on the holiday season to keep their bottom lines healthy, face a crisis of identity. They struggle to adapt, attempting to shift their marketing campaigns and product lines to focus on the true meaning of Christmas or a more sustainable, minimalist holiday. But nothing sticks. Without Santa, the industry's carefully constructed narrative of Christmas being a time to spend, to buy, to indulge, crumbles. And with it, an entire economic pillar begins to crack. But perhaps the most startling effect is the change in the way we view Christmas itself. Without Santa's figurehead driving consumer desires, people begin to rediscover what the holiday truly means. Christmas transforms from an annual commercial spectacle into something more personal, more intimate. The pressure to create the perfect holiday fades, and instead, families find joy in simplicity. They focus on experiences rather than material goods, sharing meals, creating traditions, and simply being together. While some mourn the loss of the grand spectacle that Christmas once was, others embrace the quieter version of the holiday. A sense of relief washes over many as the pressure to outdo each other with extravagant presents and expensive decorations lifts. Without Santa at the center of the holiday, people reconnect with the core of Christmas, generosity not tied to materialism, but rooted in compassion, in giving, in being present for one another. In the void left by Santa, a new vision of the holiday emerges. One that is less about what's under the tree, and more about what's around it, the family, the warmth, the love. Christmas becomes a time to focus on human connection, not consumer culture. And though the economy may take time to adjust, this new, simpler version of Christmas may just be the antidote to the overconsumerism that has plagued the holiday for so long. The commercial collapse of Christmas could ultimately lead to a rebirth. Without Santa, we might realize that Christmas wasn't about the toys, the tech gadgets, or the shopping sprees. It was always about the people we care about. The holiday could evolve into a time for reflection, kindness, and togetherness, free from the shadows of advertising, sales, and expectations. And perhaps, in this quieter, more meaningful Christmas, we would find a deeper connection to the true spirit of the season. There's a magic in the air, a warmth that lingers despite the cold. It's not in the glittering lights or the scent of pine needles, nor in the meticulously wrapped gifts stacked under the tree. It's in something deeper, something that transcends the commercialized noise and the bustle of holiday shopping. Even as the world grows older, more cynical, and more complicated, the essence of Santa remains, like a secret, a promise that lingers in the hearts of those who believe, whether they are children or adults. It's a quiet magic that can never quite be erased. Santa Claus, the man in the red suit, might have begun as a legend tied to ancient myths, a concoction of various cultures and traditions, but over time, he became something far more powerful, a symbol. The myth itself, stripped of its original details, evolves into an idea that resonates with people of all ages, backgrounds, and beliefs. The essence of Santa is not bound by his historical roots or his image as a plump, jolly man who rides a sleigh pulled by reindeer. Instead, it lives on in the very act of giving, in the belief that kindness can change the world, and that there is always room for a little magic. As societies shift, Santa's form might change with the times, but the idea, the core of who he is, remains intact. The myth might be reshaped, reinterpreted, or even challenged, but its heart stays the same. Children, who once looked to Santa for toys and sweets, begin to grow into adults who understand that what Santa represents is much bigger than presents. It's about belief, joy, wonder, and an unshakable hope that, even in the darkest of times, someone out there still cares. In a world where the commercial face of Christmas threatens to overshadow everything else, the myth of Santa manages to resist, like a quiet undercurrent that runs through the fabric of holiday celebrations. He has become more than just a character. He is a force that refuses to fade away, even as cultures change and evolve. Santa represents the part of ourselves that still believes in magic, in the possibility of good, and in the power of generosity. He is the reminder that even when everything feels impossible, there's always room for hope. The essence of Santa might live in the small, seemingly insignificant moments that we often overlook. Perhaps it's in the joy of seeing someone's face light up when they receive a gift, a gift that didn't come from a store, but from the heart. Perhaps it's in the quiet act of giving, the unspoken understanding that we share in something greater than ourselves. Santa's myth lives on in the way we care for one another, and the small acts of kindness that, when strung together, create a world where magic feels possible again. In every culture, Santa's essence can be found. Even in parts of the world where he might not be recognized by name, the idea of generosity, warmth, and kindness still thrives. The myth may change forms, perhaps taking on new faces, like La Befana in Italy or the Yule Goat in Sweden, but the spirit remains constant. The world has evolved, and so too has the way we celebrate Christmas, yet Santa remains timeless, his essence embedded in the shared human experience. The myth lives on, not because of who Santa was, but because of what he represents, the belief that kindness and joy can transcend the mundane, that the spirit of giving has the power to transform lives. Even in a world that seems less enchanted by magic and more focused on the harsh realities of existence, Santa's myth remains. It's a myth that whispers to us in quiet moments, urging us to be better, to give more, and to believe in the goodness of others. And maybe that's what makes the myth so enduring. Santa's message, while simple, is revolutionary. It's the idea that one person, one symbol, can embody the best of humanity. His story isn't confined to one specific time, one specific place, or one specific version. It transcends the details of the legend, leaving behind only the essence, the belief that there's always room for love, for generosity, for hope. The myth lives on, not in the sleigh or the reindeer or the red suit, but in the belief that we are all capable of giving a little magic to the world. As long as there are people who still believe in kindness, in the possibility of miracles, in the power of love, Santa will never be truly gone. He might not be the man in the red suit that we remember from childhood, but his essence, his spirit, will endure. And perhaps, in that belief, we find the true magic of Christmas, that no matter how far we've come, or how much the world changes, there's always room for a little bit of wonder, for a bit of magic, for Santa Claus. Santa's myth isn't a relic of the past. It's a living, breathing part of our collective psyche, a reminder that no matter how much we grow, no matter how jaded we become, there's still a piece of us that believes in the impossible. That belief, the one that defies logic and reason, is what ensures that Santa will never truly fade away. And as long as that belief exists, the myth of Santa will never die. It will evolve, it will adapt, but it will always remain a part of us, a part of the magic that makes life worth living. Santa's story is not one of simple joy or innocent wonder. It is one woven with shadows as much as light, with echoes of ancient fears and hidden truths, as much as the laughter of children. Behind the twinkling lights, the jingling bells, and the joy of gift-giving lies a duality, a tension between good and evil, between light and darkness, that has been a part of Santa's story from the very beginning. The legend that we embrace today is not a perfect image of generosity and kindness alone. It is a reflection of the complexities of human nature, of how darkness and light can coexist, sometimes in the same breath. We think of Santa as a benevolent figure, the embodiment of generosity and cheer, but his story has always carried with it a darker side. From the punishing Krampus, who accompanies him to punish the naughty, to the ancient tales of gift-giving intertwined with sacrifices and rituals, Santa's story has never been solely about warmth and giving. There is a hidden aspect of his myth that lingers just beneath the surface, the fear that comes from what is unknown, the threat of what happens if we stray too far from the path of goodness. As children, we are taught that Santa sees everything we do, that he knows when we've been bad or good. This is a reminder that moral judgment looms, a warning hidden in the excitement of Christmas morning. The duality of Santa's story, his role as both a giver and a judge, captures the tension that exists in our lives, between light and dark, reward and punishment, love and fear. It is this complex interplay of emotions that makes the legend of Santa so powerful. It's a story that pushes us to examine our own behaviors, our own moral compass, while simultaneously offering us the hope of redemption and the thrill of magical wonder. The darkness in Santa's story is not merely a shadow to be feared, but a reflection of the deep complexities of the human condition. The legend serves as a reminder that good cannot exist without evil, light cannot shine without the darkness from which it is born. Without the night, there would be no reason to celebrate the coming of dawn. Without the threat of punishment, the rewards of good deeds might lose their meaning. In this sense, Santa's myth holds a mirror up to our lives, revealing the balance of good and bad, joy and sorrow, light and shadow. In a way, we need these shadows in our lives to understand the brilliance of the light. Without them, the concept of joy would feel shallow, the spirit of giving would lose its significance, and the magic of Christmas would be diminished. The holiday season, much like Santa's myth, is a dance between the light and the dark, a reflection of the human experience itself. We embrace the brightness of the season, the hope it offers, but we must also acknowledge the darker side, the fears and uncertainties that shape our lives. The legend of Santa doesn't shy away from this complexity. It embraces it, weaving both the light and dark into a story that is richer, more meaningful, and ultimately more human. For in the shadows, we find the true essence of the holiday, the understanding that love and generosity, while precious, are also earned through hardship and struggle. It's in the darkness of winter nights that we come to appreciate the warmth of the fire, the glow of the Christmas tree, and the joy of being together. As we reflect on Santa's story, we realize that it's not just about the bright lights and the gifts or the man in the red suit who has come to symbolize the holiday. It is about the deeper truth of life itself, that light and darkness coexist in every moment. And it is in this balance that we find the true meaning of Christmas, one that celebrates both the light of hope and the shadows that make it shine brighter.